This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
All right, Real Talkers, here we go. We know that many of you are going to be catching this episode through your Easter weekend, through your Passover celebrations with your family. We appreciate that. And so we proudly, and may I say unapologetically, present a super episode today. Now, conventional wisdom in podcast production is keep it to 40 minutes or less. But you know, oftentimes as we dig into issues that matter, as the host is wont to bloviate, every once in a while it goes a little bit longer. Naheed Nenshi, I was just leading up to the big introduction for you, and I suppose I did. I think that may be the first time I've actually said bloviate on the show.
It's a good word. It's a good word.
It's one of my favorite words.
It sort of describes us both. And I completely ruined your intro, so I'm going to shut up now.
That's okay. People would also say, those same podcast experts, that moments like this are the best kind of moments where things just sort of unfurl, because I was about to go on and on about how, you know, things are happening in Alberta on the education front, and everybody's wondering if your party's going to change its name and if the federal NDP are going to win any seats, and people are keeping an eye on the spotlight zeroing in on Alberta's teachers. Feels like in particular social studies teachers. And then of course everybody in the corner of their eye is watching the Artemis II coverage, and well, I'll tell you what, and here's what I'll let the audience know, is in this episode, which they may take in bite-sized chunks over the Easter weekend, or perhaps all at once on a super walk with your dogs, we're going to cover it all.
Okay.
And we're going to jump in with you in just a quick second. But first, I want to let everybody know that this episode is happening with the presenting sponsorship of our friends at RapidX Financial. You want to talk about a world that changes fast. Well, if the crypto world is your thing, then that is absolutely, without a doubt, the case. You can check them out online 24/7 at rapidxfinancial.com. Your trust in an exchange. If crypto's your thing, if Bitcoin's your thing, that can't be a gamble. And that's why we're proud to partner with RapidX Financial. We know the team behind it. They're a made-in-Alberta solution backed by the exact same experts behind those rapid cash ATMs that you've seen across Canada for like a quarter century. Shout out to the Saville Center. Was grabbing a coffee just the other day. I hit the rapid cash ATM. Well, now they're in the crypto business, and they're making it easy for you to get started with 3 different ways to trade. They have their physical crypto ATMs, pretty self-explanatory. If you're like me, you like talking to a human, you could use a little guidance from time to time. Or maybe you're making a discrete, larger value trade. They have their over-the-counter desk. And then, of course, their secure online platform. That's what I'm showing you right now if you're watching our live stream presented by California Closets. There's a special offer for Real Talkers exclusively at rapidxfinancial.com. The promo code Ryan50, Ryan50, all one word, will take 50% off fees on all of your online Interac e-transfer trades. To put your mind at ease, to give you the confidence you need, I'll let you know that RapidX Financial is secure, it's FinTrack registered, and critically, it's non-custodial, which means you're always going to control your keys. That's promo code Ryan50 at rapidxfinancial.com. Well, here he is with us in studio in our historic Mercer Warehouse studio, downtown Edmonton. Thanks for making the trip in. You got a big day ahead of you, down to Calgary. The life, I suppose, of an opposition leader is there's never a dull moment, because you're out there pounding the pavement. You're trying to hold the government to account. You're trying to grow your base. You're trying to get your message out there. Thanks for choosing Real Talk as one of the places you'll do it.
Well, thank you. That is a great description of the life today. But just before we went on air, folks, I was telling Ryan that, you know, things that make a difference in my life that nobody else cares about. We have changed the order of business on Thursdays.
Yes.
So question period is in the morning instead of the afternoon, which sounds very minor. And oh my gosh, it messes up my day. But it's all a good thing. I'm happy to do it, and I'm thrilled that we're early enough that I can come talk to you first.
Yeah, we appreciate it, and you know this audience is going to want to hear. I don't know what this is all about. Sasky James, you see this. Look at it. It comes up in orange on our YouTube Super Chat. I don't know if he could have planned that or not, but James kicks in $28 toward the show, which we sure appreciate.
Oh, thank you, James.
He wants me to thank you for your strong message about the feds, he says, and the golden cat. He says it was a masterclass move that hit a copper nerve. We can get to the golden cat in a moment.
Oh my gosh, that's not even on our list, but we can talk about the Saudi jets and everything. I'm happy to do that. Yeah, I mean, you want to do that off the top?
Well, I mean, James has kind of set the table for us and paid $28 to do it.
All right, here we go, James. The golden cat is just a stupid symbolic thing, but it is symbolic of the entitlement of this government. Look, it's not lost on me. They won't let me do this in QP, so I'm going to do it with you. It is not lost on me that it is Passover. And happy Passover and happy Easter, everyone. But do you remember the story of the Exodus? Do you remember what happened when they were in the desert and Moses went up onto the mountain to get the 10 Commandments? Well, the Israelites built a giant golden calf that they worshipped. And for that, God exiled them to 40 years in the desert. So to me, this golden cat is a real a symbol of that kind of entitlement. But the real issue here is the total lack of disclosure of these gifts that the government put in place. So a weird thing happened, and because we're on Real Talk and people really love politics, I'll actually tell you the weird thing that happened.
Sure.
So once a year, the leader of the opposition gets to question the premier for 2 hours in what we call budget estimates. And it's the only time that we kind of go one-on-one, though it's really weird. I speak for 10 minutes, she speaks for 10 minutes. We don't really go back and forth. But you ask her about her budget and her financial statements and so on. And sometimes it's a gotcha moment, and sometimes it's a little bit of a fishing trip. And so there was just something that my staff noticed is when she went to the middle, you remember that she left right when they introduced the bill to force the teachers back to work. It's all full circle. She went on a random trip to the Middle East that wasn't for anything in particular, and why was it scheduled in that week? And we were just combing over the receipts of it, and there was a receipt missing. There was a flight from here to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and there was a flight home from the United Arab Emirates, but there was no flight in between. So my staff just said, why don't you just ask where that receipt is, because she forgot to submit the receipt or something. And then I went, well, I've actually done a lot of work in the Middle East, so I wonder if she took a private jet. So I asked that question, did she take a private jet? And she just said, well, of course I did. And it was one of those moments that never happens in politics where you ask a question and you get an answer. And then we realized that she decided that the Saudi energy minister, Prince Al Saud, is now a friend of hers because they bonded over, God help us of all things, fighting global poverty. So he offered her a gift with no expectation of anything in return. And that gift was a series of private jet flights, a basically curated and catered tour of Saudi Arabia. She went to all the hot spots. She stayed, she won't tell us where, but I know one of the places she went, and I know there is no thing there that is not a 7-star hotel. Or she stayed in the guest house of the palace, who knows. But she won't tell us how many flights she took or how many hotels she stayed in. And under their conflict of interest rules, they don't ever have to disclose it. If I hadn't asked, we never would have known. And so this is pretty shocking. A woman who went after Trudeau for a helicopter flight once has been taking private jets from a foreign government, which is not anything you're normally allowed to do. You know, the second I got into this job, I cut off all my external business activities because you're not supposed to, even before I was an MLA. And so she's accepted probably hundreds of thousands of dollars in value from a foreign government. And at the same moment, she said she's applying for her security clearance. But here's the thing. If she's accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars of undisclosed gifts from a foreign government, who, by the way, is a massive competitor of ours in the oil economy, she's not getting her security clearance. They'll think she's a foreign agent. And she doesn't seem to understand the implications of doing this stuff. And it's shocking to me. They're so gullible, this government. They get taken by every grifter, every con man. I'm not saying the prince is a grifter or a con man, but she fundamentally thinks he just gave her a gift because he likes her and doesn't ever think there's going to be a quid pro quo in the future, which is crazy thinking.
What's your biggest concern for the people that, and there's a lot of people that don't seem to be bothered by this. As a matter of fact, I talked about it with strategist Stephen Carter coming up on a week ago, that a lot of folks that, in particular conservatives that piled on Alison Redford and ran her out of office for much less, don't seem to be bothered by this. And I think there's a lot of reasons. People can check out Carter's explanation for that in that episode. But at the end of the day, if someone goes, yeah, whatever, fly private, maybe someone goes, my family flies private, or if I was over there, if there's no other option than a 7-star hotel, that's where you have to stay. Like, at the end of the day, what's the biggest concern? You talk about the biggest competitor angle, which is interesting. You're alluding to a compromised premier to a certain degree. Like, what's the biggest?
There's three things, right? Number one is these are the people who set the price of oil, by and large, which is one of the premier's greatest problems in her inability to manage her budget. Number two is it's a foreign government. If this were China or India, she would have gone insane about foreign interference. She doesn't talk about it when it's the US or Saudi Arabia for some reason. So it's a foreign government giving her the money. But the number 3 thing is this real sense of entitlement that has sunk into this government. That's what sunk Alison Redford, right? And for far, far, far less than this, for a tiny fraction of this. And this government and this premier every single day, you know, I said yesterday in the House, l'état c'est moi, right? Because she says, I am the government, that Albertans who disagree with me are not true Albertans, that even my caucus, it doesn't matter what my caucus says, doesn't matter that some of them are separatist, people should only listen to me. So this incredible authoritarian streak, and we'll have a bunch of things to talk about today, which are all about taking away people's human rights, taking away their freedom of speech, running this authoritarian world. It's just a symbol of what this government has become. And this is what happens with conservative governments. You know, people sometimes, I used to say about the old PC regime, people will excuse the corruption because of the competence. And that was always frustrating to Danielle Smith when she was leader of the opposition, that they were so corrupt, but they were kind of, you know, they knew how to run the government. But what we have in the UCP is twice the corruption and none of the competence. And that's really starting to sink in with Albertans, I think.
Interesting comment, which I appreciate, from Aurora Astra in our live chat, powered by Park Power, says, I hope that this isn't just a slag the UCP interview. I hope that Nenshi talks about what the NDP's plan is. If
don't we have that comment every time I come on this show?
I think so.
And
well, the audience has a high standard.
And
you
we
know?
will.
He says healthcare and resource development and education and relationship with the feds and taxation. We'll get to all of that. And Aurora Astra, you have my word. Let's get into Bill 25.
Sure.
The general premise of it, I read the entire bill. I want people to know, 20 plus pages, just so I don't feel like I'm summarizing it unfairly. But the government itself, including the education minister, who will join us next week, just after the Easter break, says that they're endeavoring to remove ideology and politics from classrooms. Now, they're using political levers to do so. Yeah. Do you feel, though, that perhaps this is addressing something that has become an issue, teachers overstepping and trying to communicate or even promote their own personal, political, or other beliefs in the classroom?
Honestly, there is zero evidence of that, and that kind of statement is a direct affront to the professionalism of teachers. So here's the thing, Ryan. Public education is a mess. We've got the worst funded public education system in the country, though the minister will tell you next week it's not the worst anymore because I had to give the teachers the deal that we forced on them using the notwithstanding clause, which took us from number 10 to number 9. Come on. We've gone from the best public education system in the world to the worst funded one. Classroom size, classroom complexity, safety in schools, these are all massive issues. The morale among students, parents, and teachers is the lowest it's ever been. And the education bill that this government introduces, they actually introduced 2 of them at the same time, a private member's bill and this one. The private member's bill puts ideology into the classroom and forces every school to have fossil fuel appreciation day. No joke. And the other bill is called Take Politics Out of the Classroom. So they don't even know what they're doing. But Bill 25 is particularly offensive for 2 reasons. About 3/4 of it is just frickin' virtue signaling, nothing but. And so the Minister of Education now gets to decide what schools are named. The schools cannot fly any flags except the Canadian and Alberta flags. And you have to sing O Canada every week. And by the way, on the flags, this is kind of funny because I said to the Premier in question period, you know, you've banned the treaty flags, you've banned the Métis flag, you've banned the Franco-Albertan flag in French immersion schools. But obviously that's not what you meant to do. You were trying to ban the pride flag, and you don't have the guts to just say we want to ban the pride flag. Why don't you just ban the pride flag? And she stood up and she said, the Canadian and Alberta flags are enough. Look in this chamber. We only fly the Canadian and Alberta flags. And in the middle of her sentence, she said, and all those other flags that are in this chamber. She didn't even realize in our own chamber we have all these flags flying, and it doesn't seem to impact the political ideology in our chamber. So all of this is just a bit silly. And when I asked her, why do you want the power to rename schools? What school's name offended you so much? Was it Michael Fair's school because you don't want to name a school after a gay guy? Was it Nelson Mandela School because, well, you know? Or what? And are we going to have the Sam Raish School of Finance and Ethics sometime soon here? But in reality, then her answer was really weird. And her answer was, This is about safety in schools. We don't want people to be triggered by the name of the school and become violent. Like, sorry, what? And then they spent a bunch of time having bureaucrats comb through the Education Act and remove 2 words. They removed the word welcoming, as in schools have to be welcoming, and they removed the word diverse, because public schools, I suppose, are no longer diverse in a UCP world. And so I said, who does that help? Like, who don't you want the school to be welcoming to? Do you not want to be not welcoming to gay kids or immigrant kids or kids with disabilities? And she again said, if we say schools are not welcoming, they will be less violent and more safe. Like, literally, these words, I speak English, and these words don't make sense to me. If this was really a bill about school safety, we would support it in a second. But this has nothing to do with school safety. It's all virtue signaling. But then it gets really dangerous. And I think you're going to have a social studies teacher on in a few minutes here. But this is the dangerous part, because how do you teach current events? How do you teach social studies with a facade of neutrality? So if I'm teaching about Stalin or Pol Pot or the Rwandan genocide or slavery or residential schools, how exactly do I teach the other side of that? What is the good side of Stalin?
You know what, though? I bet you a lot of people would have been with you for like your first 4 examples on the list. And then as soon as you got to residential
I did it
schools,
on purpose.
You agree with me then?
Yeah.
That
because
you can't put, well, for a lot of people, let me say, you can't put like the Rwandan genocide and residential schools in the same conversation.
Yeah,
There's a lot of people that aren't convinced.
I did that on purpose.
Yeah.
Because, in fact, and I was hoping you'd pick up on it, because, in fact, that's really the issue. That's what they're trying to get at here. They're trying to get at, you want to say residential schools weren't really that bad. The people were well-meaning, right? And there's a big debate about that, but fundamentally that's what they're trying to get to, and that's why they put this in place. But remember your own high school days, mine, back in the Stone Ages, right? Especially when you're a teenager. You actually need to be able to be exposed to different views. You need a social studies teacher who's teaching current events, because that's in the curriculum, to basically say, look, here's how I feel about this issue. I'm going to teach you the facts. I have an opinion. You have an opinion. And let's engage with those opinions. Let's talk about that. That's how you learn to be a citizen. The really ironic thing about this whole thing is if you take the legislation as written, social studies teachers won't be able to talk about the separatism referendum as it's happening. Social studies teachers won't be able to talk about the convoy. And so this is not about neutrality. This is about chilling conversation. And I think, and ask the teacher, he'll know better than me, but I was a professor as well. And to me, I actually taught a course that was called Contemporary Debates and Globalization. And the whole idea was to force the students to look at both sides, and particularly the sides they disagreed with. And what this does is it takes away the ability for anyone to do that, because they'll be scared of losing their job. And so it's funny, for a supposedly libertarian government, they restrict people's speech all the time when it comes to speech that they don't agree with, and they're scared of free speech. And I find that weird. And not only does this bill not solve any real problems in the school, it sends a bunch of virtue signals. The best one is singing "O Canada" every week, which is their sop to "We're not really separatists." I guess that song will become...
I spent more time talking about that yesterday with Johnny than anything else. That's the one part that I'm like, yeah. I mean, I'm sure it seems to me most schools are already doing that. But
I mean, sure, whatever.
But it's a little bit of a bit of a hard swerve.
But the point is, it's virtue signaling, right? And maybe it'll be Paul Brandt's Alberta Bound after the separatism.
But it's kind of reverse virtue signal, or I don't know if you want whatever virtue signaling. But anyway, means anymore.
But the problem is that they're doing a bunch of stuff, and I'm sure we'll have a minute. I'm looking at the clock.
Well, you tell us.
Yeah. But like they did this judicial appointments thing, which is pure virtue signaling. It'll never happen that Alberta should be the only province to appoint its own federal judges. But this one actually has a dangerous element to it. And the dangerous element is you're going to reduce the quality of education kids are getting. Simple as that.
In our live chat powered by Park Power, Jillian says, yeah, here's me teaching math to 36 kids. Hey, kids, let me just interrupt our learning of multiplying polynomials to tell you what I think about the UCP. She says, kids have been up playing Fortnite. They can barely follow me already. She says it's not happening. Erica says, how do you stay impartial during social studies, right? By sticking to the facts and the truth without ideological framing. The good, the bad, and the ugly tell the truth. I'll tell you what we'll do, Real Talkers. We'll check in with Dr. Jonathan Sharek. He's in the house. He's in our green room right now. He's a department head. He's a high school social studies teacher, long time. He's going to take us into it in one of our 3 feature interviews today, presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. Right now, we're with the leader of Alberta's official opposition, Naheed Nenshi from the Alberta NDP, the Avi Lewis win. He wins by double what the next closest competitor did. Heck of an effort from Heather McPherson out of Edmonton Strathcona, but it's Avi Lewis who will lead the federal NDP forward. And the general sense that Canadians have is that NDP Premier David Eby's fine with him. He doesn't seem to be your cup of tea. He doesn't seem to be Carla Beck's cup of tea as the leader of the official opposition NDP in Saskatchewan. And Wab Kinew, quote, loves the guy. So what the hell is going on with progressives on the prairies in BC?
Well, we're all in very different places. And I, without nitpicking, read Eby's statement again. Eby was very clear without being very clear on what his boundaries were.
He could take him or leave him.
Nah, he didn't say that. He basically gave him a series of warnings, but he did it in a very polite way.
In the David Eby way.
Yeah, in the David Eby way. Very tall man, very soft-spoken.
Yes.
But here's the thing. The federal government, the federal NDP is sort of not in a strong point. That's a polite way of putting it. But the provincial sections of the New Democrats are actually doing really well. We are the government or the official opposition in most provinces of Canada in everything from Ontario West. And so I have a very different job, and to the very first question, we'll get to that right now. I have a very different job than Avi Lewis. My job is to show Albertans what a New Democrat government would look like. We are a government in waiting. And Avi Lewis will admit to you he is not a government in waiting. He's not going to be the prime minister anytime soon. And so he has a very different role to play in showing what a federal New Democrat Party would be like. The parties are fully autonomous. They have been for a long time. Our members voted a year ago to split membership. So if you're a member of the provincial party, you're not a member of the federal party. And some thousands of provincial New Democrats.
How important was that to you, by the way?
It was important.
Yeah.
And eventually our members did it because I just wanted to show that we are a big tent. So, and this is not a controversial statement. It's just numbers. People who support the federal New Democrats support us. People who support the federal Liberals support us. And there is an astonishingly large number of Poilievre Nenshi voters out there. People who support the Conservatives federally and the New Democrats provincially. So we're a really big tent.
An astonishing number of Poilievre Nenshi supporters?
Well, just look at Edmonton.
I don't know if I've ever met one.
Look at Edmonton, right? So Edmonton has all but 2 of the seats federally are Conservative, and every one of the seats provincially is New Democrat. Yeah. So the math doesn't work unless people were voting both places, right? And so,
but you're not wrong, and we've talked about it, and I've wondered about it on the show before, but I've never seen anyone wearing like the 2 buttons.
Well, because we're talking about real people. We're not talking about political partisans. There's not people going to both conventions, right? But real people who are voting are like, I like what this guy has to say, I like what that guy has to say, and they make their decisions, right? Ontario has been like this forever. They tend to vote one way provincially and another way federally and flip it when the federal government changes. And so in any case, we have to be a pretty big tent, and we have to appeal to Albertans, which is why last Friday, and so I have a big tent, and even in my caucus, you'll know very well, Ryan, there are people with quite different ideologies who nonetheless want to work for a better Alberta. And so last Friday...
It's kind of like the UCP, actually.
Except we're actually united and they're not. Last Friday, we released our new energy plan. I call it the first look at our energy plan because I want people to look at it and give us feedback. You can see it at albertandp.ca. And I think that it really does square the circle. You know, it talks about market access for pipelines in a time of global uncertainty when people really need Canadian energy. But it doesn't just talk about crude oil. The biggest thing in it from a crude oil perspective is we're actually saying, you know, it's going to be very hard to build that Northwest Coast pipeline because the government has messed up the Indigenous consultation and the conversation with Premier Eby so badly. But there's another route. There's a southern BC pipeline route that goes along the Trans Mountain right-of-way where a lot of the permitting is in place. So we're saying let's try and make that one happen and get a win-win situation there. Let's talk about Energy East again and see if we can make the economics work because this is the one window of opportunity. I love that project, always have, because it's nation building. But that's the one window of opportunity for that. We also have to talk about natural gas. Big deal. We have to talk about electricity, fixing the mess of the electricity markets that the UCP has made, building interties, what I call electricity pipelines with our neighbors, which will drastically slash emissions and reduce people's energy bills. So, and critical minerals and value-added manufacturing. So it's kind of all in there. And, probably Avi Lewis won't like any of it. But here's the thing, it doesn't matter. He's not the prime minister. I don't have to negotiate with him if I'm the premier. And he can certainly go his own way and appeal to different sorts of people. But I have to show folks how a New Democrat government would take climate seriously, but also really grow our energy sector and build good jobs.
You know the phrase, if you're explaining, you're losing. And I'm not saying that that's the case here per se, but you have to work like doubly as hard to convince people that you're sincere about Energy East, to convince people that you wouldn't like shut down the oil sands. So like, why not start with a name change? Like what benefit? And with respect to Rachel Notley, with respect to NDP leaders before her, with respect to Brian Mason and all the MLAs and the history of the party. I mean, no disrespect, but it strikes me as like a yoke around the neck. Why not change the name? All the explaining is done.
I've got a bit of a yoke, but we all have yokes in politics, right? The UCP has Danielle Smith, the biggest yoke you could imagine. But in reality here, I'll be cheeky with you for a second.
Oh, for once?
Why doesn't the federal party change their name? People belong to the provincial parties, right? And the provincial parties are in ascendance. The NDP, the CCF, the predecessor, was started in the number 1 Legion Hall in downtown Calgary. And we've had a long tradition of, here's a lot of P's, pragmatic, prairie, populist, progressive premiers, from Tommy Douglas to Rachel Notley, here on the prairies, and people know what that means. And so, look.
You must have done some polling on it, though. Like, is it something you've considered?
Well, poly nerds love talking about this stuff, right? But look what happened in British Columbia. The BC Liberals didn't want to be associated with Justin Trudeau. They changed their name to BC United. Where's BC United now? They're gone, because most people don't actually follow politics and didn't realize that was the same party they used to vote for. And I'll tell you one funny thing, which is we did one little focus group, because I've been saying Alberta's New Democrats a lot. And so we had a little focus group and we said, do you like it better when he says Alberta New Democrats or Alberta NDP? And a large number of the very thoughtful, very engaged people in the focus group had never stopped to think what the ND and NDP stands for. They didn't realize it was the same thing. So,
have you considered the Alberta Progressive Party? And every time that somebody Googled the Alberta Pension Plan or APP and thoughts of splitting away, the SEO would drive them to your new website. That one's for free.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Hey, before we run out of time, I want to ask you about a couple of other things.
Okay, we'll go rapid.
Real quick. Well, the changes to electoral boundaries. I've had sort of recurring comments in our live chat, powered by Park Power, over the past few days. People are saying, are we going to talk about the gerrymandering? Now, gerrymandering is a loaded phrase, but electoral boundaries are changing, and there are some implications. What's your perspective on it?
Listen, I'm going to give you the 1-minute version, but Ryan, I'm going to offer that I will come back even next week to talk about this in more detail.
Doors always open.
Because this is a really big deal, and people should be worried about it. So there's an independent commission. We appoint 2, they appoint 2, they appoint a supposedly neutral chair. They thought, because they have 3 out of 5 appointees, they were going to get whatever they wanted. So in the fall, they continually said it's an independent process, we're going to adopt the commission's report. As it turned out, the commission in the fall put out a unanimous report that was totally fine. It wasn't everything I wanted, it wasn't everything they wanted, but it was fine. The commission did a good job. Thousands of Albertans came and talked to the commission. They did a second round between the interim and the final report. Thousands of people came and talked to the commission. The vast majority said, this is good work. I want to change this boundary here, this neighborhood here, or whatever. But there are a few people who showed up, and they strangely showed up with maps that all looked the same. Same font, same design, and crazy gerrymandering. And by the way, those maps, they had a bit of an oopsie. They had an Alberta government document classification on them. So these are normal people, theoretically, just bringing in these maps, but they were actually created with taxpayer money by the UCP. And then suddenly, after all the commission meetings were done, the UCP members of that commission put out a minority report with these maps that were the same maps. And that means that the UCP almost certainly provided their independent commissioners with these maps and interfered in the process. And they're crazy, by the way. 11 ridings in Calgary become rural-urban hybrids. Lethbridge no longer exists. Red Deer no longer exists. Like, these are crazy stuff. And, Yet the majority report of the commission, which is, I have to keep reminding people, there is only one recommendation. The minority report doesn't count. The chair's letter at the very end of the report doesn't count. There is only one recommendation. And in Canadian history, governments take the recommendation and they adopt it. They don't amend it except for tiny little changes if someone made a mistake, but they adopt it. But this government takes its cues from Trump. And so they are going to try and gerrymander this. The government will not answer a simple question, which is, will you put the report to a vote in the legislature? And suddenly they're saying, well, MLAs should have the final say. We should draw the boundaries. This is so antithetical to democracy. It's illegal. It's unconstitutional. You can't use the notwithstanding clause on voting rights, by the way, which I told the Premier and she seemed surprised. And so this is a huge problem. And, a lot of people in the world don't really care as much as you and I do and your listeners do about democracy, but I care about it a lot. And the fact that they are so uncomfortable in their own position, if they thought they were way ahead in the polls, they wouldn't feel the need to cheat to win. And this is straight up cheating and rigging.
If you were to form government, would you just change them all back?
Well, we would accept the independent commission report. Simple as that.
Okay.
And by the way, we will not accept anything other than the individual commission report. So I said it in the House. I think it's the first time these words have been said in the House. You try to mess with this report, we'll see you in court.
Les wants me to ask you about the accessibility bill, his private members bill, Bill 206.
Yeah.
We focused on it a couple of weeks ago in a Real Talk Roundtable. I encourage people to check it out. Powerful stuff from one of your MLAs, Marie Renaud.
She's amazing.
Alongside Bean Gill and Zachary Weeks, incredible advocates. Les wants me to ask you about it. I mean, I guess let me just frame it in the way I would, which is that it's really tough to get private members bills passed. They're almost always squashed.
Opposition private members bills are almost always squashed.
But do you feel as though the message resonated? Do you feel like the issue of accessibility has been taken seriously at the Alberta legislature? This is a real daily issue for a lot of people.
Yeah, this was a really easy gimme for the government. There was no trap in here. It didn't cost a ton of money. The Americans with Disabilities Act was passed 36 years ago. Every province in Canada except Prince Edward Island and Alberta have accessibility legislation. And if you're moving people to ADAP from AISH, which means they have to go to work, you need some backup so that the workplaces are physically accessible, right? So that workplaces are accessible even to people with non-physical disabilities. So this was an easy one for the government. It actually falls in line with their own policy, but because it came from Marie Renaud and the opposition, they just threw it away. And it's a shame. Government should work better than that.
Real quick to wrap, because there's plenty of time to talk about this, the separatists claim that they have reached their signatures needed to trigger the process to get that question on the referendum in October. I don't doubt that they have the signatures at all. The question I want to ask you is a question that people keep asking me, which is like, who's leading the Stay campaign and what's going on? Because people are starting to panic and people are going, well, if it's Thomas Lukaszuk, then it's Lukaszuk. Where's Nenshi's spot on this? Is there going to be federal politicians involved? What role are independent media commentators? I mean, I'm going to do a run of hoodies at the very least. I'll tell you that much. But people are feeling like the separatists are way more organized and focused right now. And I feel like the stakes are too high for people to wait too long. So your thoughts on that?
I need another feature interview with you, Ryan.
Yeah.
So real quick, the most common email subject line I get right now is, what can I do?
Okay.
So people send me this all the time. So next week, probably Thursday, I don't want to make too many promises, but I'll give you a scoop. Next week, we will be launching a campaign where everyday citizens can get involved in the fight to save Canada. And look, Thomas Lukaszuk is doing great work. Jason Kenney is doing great work. The two of them don't talk to each other, I don't think, very much. But on this, number one is 1,000 flowers have to bloom. We have to let people come at this from different angles. But at the same time, I've been spending a lot of time talking to people who lived through Brexit, who lived through the 1980 and 1995 referenda in Quebec. And I've been talking to myself, who lived through that plebiscite on the Olympics in Calgary, and learning lessons. And the number one lesson is you can't sleep or walk your way into one of these referenda. It requires sophisticated political organizing, door knocking, lawn signs, a run of hoodies, right? All of it. Data collection, get out the vote efforts, all of it. So basically, we're going to run, as the Alberta New Democrats, we're going to run 2 general election campaigns in a year. We've got 25,000 volunteers in every riding in this province, and those people are going to be on the doors talking to people starting in 2 weeks' time. And we've got to do it because now that they say they have their numbers, we've got to take this very, very seriously. For the Premier, this is fun and games and virtue signaling, and at some point she's going to wrap herself in her Team Canada jersey and call herself Miss Canada or Captain Canada. But she's not going to lift a finger to actually make the referendum, the separatists, fail. So the rest of us have to do that work that she's forcing on us, because this is not fun and games. This is the future of our country. We're not going to have any investment in Alberta. No pipeline's going to get built while separatism is alive. The CEO of ATCO has told us that. But it's also pitting neighbor against neighbor. And what we know is that referenda are notoriously hard to poll. Brexit was polling roughly where separation is polling now when David Cameron started all of this. So we cannot sleepwalk on this one. We got work to do, and that's just not people with microphones like you and me. It is everyday citizens talking to their neighbors, hanging their Canadian flags, putting up their lawn signs saying, I believe in Canada. It has to happen.
And I do agree with you there, because respectfully, there will be a lot of people that want to stay in Canada that maybe don't want that tied to an NDP campaign. They don't want, it's not 100%. UCP leave, NDP stay, but we've all got to do our part. Listen, you got to go. I got to roll. Frank Florian's standing by to talk about Artemis II, so we got to get out of here.
That's exciting.
But thanks for doing this. Always appreciate your availability.
You. All right, take care.
You got it. That's Naheed Nenshi, the leader of Alberta's official opposition, NDP. Let us know what you think if you're watching us live in the live chat. And of course, you can always send us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Friends, you've still got time to check out cateringbyfriesen.com. If you're going to be hosting friends or family this holiday season, whether it's Easter or whatever else you're celebrating, the Red Seal chefs at Catering by Friesen Brothers have you covered. And that includes, of course, their famous signature Easter meal. If you're looking to really wow your guests, you can order this Easter meal all the way through till April 9th. It's $239 plus GST to feed 6 people. Unbelievable. And that's everything you're going to need. Roasted turkey, scalloped potatoes, creamy dill carrots. In my mind, those are the stars of the show. Granny stuffing, Caesar salad, tray buns, cranberry sauce, gravy, apple crumble pie. Yeah, that's right. From start to finish, the team at Friesen Brothers has you covered. They've also, of course, got their classic Easter dinner box, feed 4 for $99, and the vegan Easter dinner box, $55 for 2. You can order multiples. You can order in-store or online at cateringbyfriesen.com. This message is presented by the Alberta Teachers Association. When 51,000 teachers spoke up for Alberta's students, what did the government do? Well, they suspended teachers' charter rights to collective bargaining. They made it harder for Alberta teachers to speak out for what students need at school. They did it by invoking the notwithstanding clause, and they didn't have to. Alberta's teachers want you to know that the government had other options, and that's why the ATA is taking the government to court to get teachers' charter rights restored. They won't stop advocating for students because it shouldn't be wrong to speak up for kids. You can learn more and get involved at progressnotpromises.ca. This is a message from the Alberta Teachers Association. I was lucky enough to run into Jake Kubisky yesterday. He's the founding CEO of Kubi Renewable Energy. I just love this guy's story. Oil field electrician, sees an opportunity 11 years ago, feels strongly that sustainables are the future, and so he leaves his 6-figure job and starts with one buddy and one pickup truck installing solar panels. Next thing you know, 11 years later, they're Western Canada's busiest solar installer, an incredible team providing innovative solar solutions for every home and business. They work on farms, they work on office towers, and of course, they work on thousands of residences across Western Canada every spring, summer, and into the fall. If you want to be on their installation schedule this spring, today is the best day to get your free quote. You can build your quote online, connect with the team at kuby.ca. That's KUBY.ca. Well, Real Talkers, I don't have to tell you that billions of people around the world are looking up and wondering what it must be like to be on that spacecraft that will circumnavigate the moon, returning to Earth on a 10-day mission, including, by the way, a Canadian astronaut. Artemis II, the first crewed test flight to the moon since Apollo. We're talking like a half a century. And everyone that I have crossed paths with, to a certain degree, is paying attention to this and is excited about it. I'm going to be honest with you. Having lived in the Metro Edmonton region for about 20 years, when I think space, when I think of exploration beyond the Earth's atmosphere, I think of Frank Florian. For many years, Frank has been steering the ship and getting people very excited, people of all ages, at the Telus World of Science. That's where he's the senior manager of Planetarium and Space Sciences, and he joins us today in a feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West with a smile smeared across his face. I'm not the least bit surprised, Frank. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Ryan. Yeah, this is a great day. Yesterday was an incredible day. So yeah, it's I'm looking forward to this mission completing and getting to hear the stories that the astronauts are going to come back with.
So Frank, as mentioned, this is the first the flight to the moon, the first flight to the moon since Apollo. It's been decades and decades. We're just gonna, as we're talking to you, we're gonna show like NASA's YouTube videos, and I can't get enough of this launch. I can watch rockets launch all day long, buddy. But why is this one, for people that maybe have only been paying just sort of a general amount of attention, why is this such a big deal? Why is this mission so important? Why now?
Well, why now? I think it's about time that we go back to the moon. And we've had 50 years of really just being in low Earth orbit with no destination really in mind, really. We kept talking about going to Mars or, but that's such a big venture to go to Mars. We have to do something closer to home. So I think they've got it right this time. Going back to the moon is an important step towards our other interests of exploration to go to Mars and other places. It's a really important thing, and I think it's about time we do this. And, people used to complain back in the 1970s, oh, why do we go to the moon? In fact, there were 3 Apollo missions that were canceled back in the early 1970s because the public was losing interest in the Apollo moon landings. For them, it was basically, we just got to beat the Russians to the moon and be first. And after that, it just kind of went downhill. People lost interest. Even the Apollo 13 mission, it was really not even talked about too much until that disaster happened on board, and then everyone was glued to their TVs to find out what was going on. But something, if we kept up that zest for exploration and the work going to the moon, we'd be maybe on Mars by now. So I think it's about time that we are now looking forward and doing things, and it's really great to see Canada being involved in this adventure as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the coolest parts. Jeremy Hansen, this former Air Force pilot, he's been an astronaut for like 17, almost 20 years. The guy looks like an astronaut, whatever an astronaut looks. He's got the chiseled jaw. God. He's just got he's the total package. But Frank, what is it like? What does it mean to you, and what should it mean? Almost, I would say, to every Canadian to have one of our own on board this craft.
I think we should be very proud. I think Jeremy Hansen basically illustrates the best of Canadians. In fact, the Canadian astronaut group, they're exemplary Canadians, and they can represent Canada very, very well. And I think they're the best of the best, as they used to say with the rocket guys, and that's what Jeremy is. He's one of the best of the best, and we wish him well in his trip. And he's waited a long time for it. So go, Jeremy.
Are you, like, when you look at, do you pull, one of the things that people say about, they'll oftentimes talk about sports in this way, and I feel like space has been the same way as well, is that it removes us to a certain degree from politics, and like we've seen some cooperation like on the International Space Station and in other missions between nations that otherwise might not cooperate. And I don't know about you. I'm not trying to drag politics into this, but I love the idea that Canada and the U.S. are collaborating on something right now with all the other noise and that kind of sense that we get that maybe we're at odds with like our big time ally, our closest neighbor. I don't know. This is landing in almost a more meaningful way with me. How about you?
I think this is what countries need to do around the world, is cooperation and going to the Star Trek mentality. That's what, brings people together is exploration, space flight, working together. We're on one little world. And I think, missions like this show again that we're this little blue-white ball in the middle of this black oasis of space, and it's really important that we get along. We're just on this one little world, all riding together. It's Spaceship Earth, and there's no place for us to actually have our little differences and blowing things up, and that it just doesn't make any sense. So really, I think space is one of those things that can bring us all together, work towards a common goal, and move ahead and bring prosperity to the human race.
I love that. I want to read you from a personal group chat here. My buddies Matt and Jordan. We were texting all through the afternoon yesterday. Matt reaches out. He says, guys, make sure, he says, the moon launch is a go. Because we didn't know, right? Nobody knew what the weather conditions were going to be in the whole 9 yards. The window was open. We didn't know. Anyway, so he gives us the heads up. he says, it's a huge moment for humanity and a shit day for science deniers. That was Matt's take on it. And then Jordan says, it's really too bad they're not touching down. They're not touching down on the moon. And then Matt says, hey, we're sending a Canadian around the moon. Good vibes only. And then after launch, he says, what an awesome moment for humanity. Obviously, it's amazing no matter what. But why do you think they're not touching down on the moon? Help explain it to us regular folks.
It comes down to testing. You don't want to basically do something without testing it and make sure all the systems are a go. Again, any new spacecraft will have like issues with it. They have to right now get all the issues ironed out of the Orion crew capsule and make sure that is going to be fit for many, many more missions in the future. So this is a shakedown, if you say, of the Orion space capsule, and that's what they need to do with landings as well. And last week, the whole process of getting to the moon changed a bit. We originally were told that Artemis 3 is going to be a landing on the moon. Well, they're not quite ready yet. They don't have a lander yet. So I think what they're looking to do now is Artemis 3 will be an Earth rendezvous element where they're just going to test some systems of a lander in Earth orbit closer to home. So if they do have any issues, they can get those fixed before you actually start descending to the lunar surface on Artemis 4. So again, a lot of this is testing, trial and error, getting things working properly, making sure there's no issues that come up, because again, safety comes first with our astronauts. We love them taking on these adventures, but we also want to make sure we bring them back from their adventures as well.
Oh man, I don't know if you saw two people who I have a lot of respect for, Ian Hannah-Mansing interviewing Chris Hadfield. Did you see that the other day?
I did. I did.
And he was I appreciated that Ian asked a tough question. He didn't phrase it like this, but he was basically like, where's an astronaut's head at when they're strapping themselves to like who knows how many liters of rocket fuel? And I remember Challenger as a young boy, and people, obviously the stakes are high, the danger level's high, very smart people are involved, but things can go wrong. And Chris Hadfield's response, very fascinating, talking about kind of the pursuit of something bigger and the whole 9 yards. But it's never lost on me the stakes and just the wild nature of what's actually happening here. How do you wrap your mind around it?
I agree. You're putting your body on this big fuel tank, and all that liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen. That's a big bomb. If that thing goes off on the ground or whatever, you'll destroy the whole launch pad and probably a whole kilometer area surrounding the launch pad. It is a very volatile kind of material, and again, they got to get this stuff right, because they don't need leaks, they don't need any kind of fires on the pad, things like that. So when they started to look at launch dates for Artemis 2, they first thought February. They had some issues and said, nope, we're not going to do this now. Let's move it ahead to March. Had some other issues. We're not doing anything right now. We're going to get these issues fixed, and then we're going to go for launch when we're all ready and going, because again, they want to make sure that it's as safe as possible for the astronauts. Now, could accidents still happen? Sure. But you want to reduce any of the chances of that by ensuring all the systems are in their best capable place.
Yeah. Frank, we're going to show some animation here. For those that are watching us, our live stream on presented by California Closets on YouTube or any of the visual platforms, this is animation from NASA. And so we can see kind of the trajectory here. Can you explain to us? So this is day 2 of 10 right now. And my understanding is that they're going to kind of fire to get this into orbit. I better stop talking so I don't. Can you explain how it all works?
Yeah, well, again, you can kind of see just a minute ago when the spacecraft was at its furthest distance from the Earth. It's that's where it is right now. The astronauts will learn later today if they're going to get the okay for the burn. So on the left-hand side of the Earth there, you may have seen that loop kind of crossing the other loop. So right now the astronauts are in that very distant loop away from the Earth, and they're going to come around the backside later today, and that's when they get the go-ahead to fire their engines for that translunar injection to take the spacecraft to the moon. Now, this is a simplified version in a way. It is going to be like a figure 8 that they're going to be doing there, but the thing is, the moon's not going to be there when they fire their engines. The moon's going to be sort of off the screen on the bottom there, because over time the moon moves around in its orbit, and you have to basically shoot where the moon's going to be in, say, 4 days time, and not where it is right now. So they're going to be shooting off in a direction where the moon will be in about 4 days time, and then you'll see it then swing around behind the moon. Now that point where it kind of crosses that figure 8, the middle of it, the the point where the orbit kind of crosses. Well, that's where the Earth's gravity and the moon's gravity sort of have a balancing point. So when they launch their engines from Earth, they have to achieve escape velocity from the Earth's gravity. So that's what they'll be doing later today. They then basically coast until they get to that point where you get that kind of loop kind of crossing over itself. And then all of a sudden the moon's gravity takes over. This is all due to, Sir Isaac Newton that came up with the laws of gravitation back then. We still use it, even though Einstein refined it back in 2015 or so with his general theory of relativity for spaceflight. Newton's ideas of gravity still work fine for getting us from A to B in space. So at that point, gravity of the moon will kind of pull the spacecraft towards the moon. They'll fly around the moon, and then it'll zip around like a slingshot in a way, go around the moon, and then come back to the Earth. And at that point where, again, you get that cross in its orbit, it's going to have the Earth's gravity take over, and the Earth's gravity will then pull the spacecraft to the Earth for its fiery re-entry over the Pacific Ocean near San Diego.
Okay, really dumb question, Frank. You've never made me feel stupid, and I've asked you a lot of dumb questions over the years. But how exact can they pinpoint the touchdown spot? Like, when they always land in the ocean, everybody sees it. And by the way, do they still chug the milk when they get out? But it's like you're not going to land like maybe you're in the Indian Ocean, maybe you're in the Pacific Ocean, right?
No, they have it all. The trajectory is actually well defined. So yesterday after launch, everything else in the mission was then calculated with the exact landing spot in the Pacific Ocean as well. So we now have the date and time. I haven't seen it being mentioned yet, but NASA does have that information right now, and they'll release it very shortly for the actual date and time of landing in the Pacific Ocean. So we just got to keep our eyes for their announcements on that. But it's very, very precise. It's all mathematics, and mathematics itself allows us to calculate these really wild orbits getting us to the moon or getting us to any of the outer planets in our solar system. So it's, when you say, is math important? Well, yes, math is very important for things like this, and kids that want to know more about it, well, learn a lot about math, because that's what is going to take us beyond our moon to other worlds in our solar system, and even then out in the galaxy.
Yeah. Hey, so I was in your stomping grounds just the other day. I took my son and his best buddy to the laser light show for K-pop Demon Hunters.
K-pop, yeah.
Oh man, wild. I was thinking I should return with a few of my college buddies a little bit later in the evening, if you know what I mean. But no, yeah. It was wonderful. And of course, you and the team at Telus World of Science had the Artemis II stuff everywhere. And I think you guys had a watch party and all that kind of stuff. But you must see kids of all ages. Like I saw it with my own eyes. There's like 6-year-olds that were looking up at the signage, and I heard people talking about it. There was a grandpa there with his granddaughters, and they were talking about it. What sort of an impact do you see on the ground when something like this happens?
Well, the response to this mission has been overwhelming. I mean, we had our watch party sold out many weeks back. In fact, back in February, during the first launch, we already sold it out. So we just kept bumping the people to the next launch date. So they all stayed with us right to the very end till yesterday. They all came by for the watch party. We had it in the IMAX theater and in the planetarium. And we had a lot of eager kids there waving Canadian flags, rooting on Colonel Jeremy Hansen on the flight, and of course his other astronauts. And we were there in anticipation, watching the clock run down until they actually said, let's, time to launch it. So we all kind of cheered and saw it go up, and we're hoping, keep my fingers crossed, that there weren't any issues that came up, because that is the critical time for launches. From when you light those engines on that rocket, there's no going back once you get them started. So just seeing it just work flawlessly, it was an incredible sight, and the kids were just cheering, and the kids were there with their families, and all their families were just ecstatic about it as well. It was just exciting, and it's great to see that excitement in younger kids and even older kids like myself when you have something like this happen. It's we don't do this every day. Maybe someday it'll become more common again, but right now it's going back to the moon is a very special thing. There's all these little kids, they only know about us going up to the International Space Station. Now we're going to a location, the moon, and that's more exciting than just kind of floating around the Earth doing experiments for kids.
Yeah, no kidding. I just want to reiterate to our podcast audience, most people will hear this there. When we brought you up on camera, you had a smile. You were like beaming when we brought you up on camera, and I knew you would be, right? Like it's been a long time, and I think especially for someone like this is your field, like this is your passion. You must have been chomping at the bit.
Oh yeah, and I was shaking myself. I mean, I couldn't even speak properly because I was so excited about the whole thing, the whole ordeal. And it just gets you when you see this happen. It's just like your whole body just like, oh wow,
Yeah.
you become speechless in a way. And then when it goes up, you just kind of have this really overwhelming excitement about it. And I don't know, but they monitor the astronauts' heart rate when they go up and throughout the entire mission. And I don't know what Jeremy Hansen's heart rate was, but I'm sure it was probably as speedy as mine was because you have that anticipation and you're waiting and waiting, waiting, and your blood just goes, your adrenaline goes, and then you're up in the air. And yeah, and that goes not only for the astronauts on board the rocket, but also the people watching it.
Yeah, and I was thinking about him too. Just I don't know him personally. I've actually never had a chance to speak with him at all. But I was thinking like you get to the point where even to become a fighter pilot, right? Like that's a big deal. There's a ton of school there. There's a ton of training there. It takes a certain type of person to fly a fighter jet. Like, I mean, oh my gosh, a jet like that. And then to become an astronaut and then to train and then to be selected for a mission like this and then to have the mission actually happen because sometimes they don't. And I was picturing him like, I don't know if it's a 5-point harness or whatever but they're sitting and they're staring straight up, right? I think is if it's still configured the same. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But I was just thinking the same thing, like what's going through his head. I can't imagine like preparing, like you said, Frank, your whole life for something. Like if he's dreamed of this, or if any of the astronauts on board have dreamed of this since they were 5 or 6 or 7 years old, how do you prepare for something like that? And how do you kind of respond when it actually happens? I don't know.
Yeah, I talked to Jeremy Hansen. We had him at the Science Center a few times, and I'm hoping that after his mission here on Artemis II, he'll be doing a cross-Canada tour and stopping here in our city of Edmonton and most likely Calgary as well, and maybe a few other locations in Western Canada. So, when you talk to these guys, they had a dream when they were little kids. Even I had a dream when I was a little kid. I saw the moon landing in '69 with my dad. I was only 4 years old. My dad took me outside, pointed at the moon, says, "There's 2 guys up there walking on the surface." And to me, that was like, wow, I want to do that. It kind of it gives you that interest, that spark to want to learn more. So after that time, I sat down myself and learned about astronomy and other things. And Jeremy, well, he basically learned about aeronautics. In fact, he's a very smart individual. He got a couple of degrees in aeronautics. So it's not only being a military test pilot, there's a lot of schooling involved there too. And as they say, they take the best of the best for the astronauts, and because they have a huge grouping of people to select from, and they really do get the best. And Jeremy represents, as I mentioned earlier, the best that Canada has to offer.
Yeah, and like you said, and I love this this animation that we're watching right now. So many incredible resources out there. This credit to Lockheed Martin who designed this animation. But I could watch this all day. Like you alluded to, the fact that there's no guarantees either. Like when he's earning these aeronautics degrees, there's no guarantee you're going to go to the moon, right? Nope. Just amazing. Let me ask you this in closing, Frank. I know you got a busy day, and we got to move on and cut you loose for your Easter weekend too. Spring break, I should mention, at the Telus World of Science is a busy time. People can always check that out. Telus World of Science, Edmonton.com. We'll link to it in the show notes. Frank Florian is our guest in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. How do you process all of this, or where's your head at with the advent of I don't know if I call it private space travel, but the billionaires like the Richard Bransons and the Jeff Bezoses and the Elon Musks and SpaceX and everything else? Like the game has dramatically changed since the last moon mission, to say the very least. How important is it to have public investment, to have government involved, or at least at arm's length with NASA and the Canadian Space Agency? You know what I'm asking.
Yeah, right now, it's the private companies right now that are really kind of pushing the envelope forward for this and creating the competition to keep the others, sharp, because again, they don't want to lose out to all these other companies either. They have to work together with these other companies to make it happen. So I think having more players in the field will allow more chances to do things a little bit differently, and hopefully get us from A to B faster and better over than just having one contractor work on something. And usually for NASA in the past, it was always the lowest contractor for whatever. So they bid and we'll select the slowest contractor because we only have so much money. Right now, it's a little bit more than that. And the thing is, there's a lot of competition right now. And you mentioned it earlier about politics. We really want to keep politics out of this. We want people to kind of work together on this. But really, I think right now, the the Americans, one big thing that they're kind of moving toward is trying to get back to the moon before the Chinese do. So there's a little bit of competition there too between countries. A little bit of, well, Americans were at the moon first, but now we're going to have the Chinese going there, and they want to create a moon base there. Well, we can't let that happen. We got to be first to do it. So there's still competition with those types of things as well. And just getting the private companies involved might speed ahead the process of getting people back to the moon quicker.
Yeah, I think competition is rarely a bad thing, to be honest with you. Do you dream of a day? Like, do you think before you die, Frank, 60 years from now, do you think you might get up there, buddy? Is that something that you've not ruled out?
Oh, I haven't ruled it out, but I'm getting too old. I think I'm 60 right now. I'll be 120 in 60 years, so they'd have to take me up in my wheelchair, I think, or if I'm still around. But it's something I've always dreamed of, being a kid, being an astronaut. But I can live through the eyes of Jeremy Hansen and the others, getting to meet them and talking to them. It's the next best thing to you yourself going up and doing this, because you're getting that firsthand experience from them about what it's like. Now, sure, I'd love to go up there, but again, with my age and that, I don't think that's going to happen unless maybe I buy a ticket on some spacecraft.
That's what I'm saying, buddy. You and me, we hit the 649.
All right, we'll do that.
I'll make you a promise. If I win the 649, I'll take you up with me. How's that?
That sounds good to me.
Okay, that's a verbal contract right there. Frank, it's always honestly such a pleasure. I got such a huge amount of respect for your advocacy and your passion. And I'm really grateful that you were able to make time to talk to us today. Your enthusiasm is contagious. Thanks for doing this.
Hey, thanks again, Ryan. You have yourself a great day, and keep looking up, and let's wish them well in their return.
You got it, my man. That's Frank Florian. Frank is the senior manager of Planetarium and Space Sciences at the Telus World of Science right here in Alberta's capital city, and you can check them out online at Telus World of Science Edmonton.ca. Telus World of Science Edmonton.ca for more. Johnny, I was kind of thinking of you, to be honest, when I was there with my son Wyatt, his buddy Brody.
Oh,
in the.
I was going to say, I think you're always thinking about me, but
well, I mean, I am often thinking.
You're
about
always
you.
on my mind, Ryan.
Yeah, you are always okay. So they call it the Ziedler Dome.
Yeah.
I don't. Have you been in there at the Telus World of Science? People,
We're going up.
it's
up,
amazing.
It's
So they have
yeah,
the I don't have to explain like what it looks like.
Well, I've seen people's footage
yeah,
of it, but
yeah.
I haven't seen it yet.
So they have and I know that we just talked about the rockets, and
No,
we're about
go ahead.
to talk about
I wanted
education.
to hear about this when you mentioned it.
So my son says to me, "Would you take me and my buddy to the K-pop Demon Hunters laser light show at the Telus World of Science?" And I was like, yeah. I mean, at this stage, I'm like, my son is like probably 2 or 3 years away from being way too cool to even want to hang out with me at all. So any opportunity I have, I'm like, let's go. But I had no idea what to expect. And it was wild. Like this K-pop Demon Hunters thing is wild. And the laser light show, I'm like, they need to run one of these at like 2 a.m. after last call, have the golden,
Dude,
like
you are one of the most high-functioning, able to absorb the most intense sensory deprecation.
Bring on the sensory overload.
Bro, like 12:30, I'm tired. I want to go home.
Nobody believes that.
2:30, I'm not going to the planetarium and taking in strobe lights. But hey, in the afternoon on a Sunday or a Saturday, for sure. I've seen people's footage of that show you're talking about. I was like, oh my God, he went, because we haven't chatted personally behind the scenes about it.
It was amazing.
It looks absolutely phenomenal. The stuff going on at the World of Science is incredible.
So cool. I'm curious to know where real time. I see a bunch of people that have been sharing in our live chat their thoughts on this mission and where you were watching it and getting your kids together. Super cool stuff. We'll keep an eye on it over the next couple of weeks, of course, and as the story develops and once they're back and take a look at it. But if this landed with you in a really neat way, or you have a personal connection you'd like to share with us, we always invite your feedback. We love it. We try to read all the comments on our YouTube episodes, so you can leave it there, or you can send us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com. I was when we were talking to Naheed Nenshi before the cameras were on, before this episode started, and he says to me, he was referencing Robert Thirsk, this sort of probably one of the better, the better known Canadian astronauts through history. Yeah. And I was telling him that Robert Thirsk's sister was my grade 4 teacher. So
what?
Yeah. So he came into the class and talked to us, and he was wearing his obviously not. I was sort of hoping he was, when the astronauts walk down the thing, what do they call it? The galleyway or whatever they call it. And they're walking and they're in the full astronaut suit. Grade 4 me was hoping that he would show up to our school wearing that, which he did not. But he had his full, like, whatever you'd call it, kind of the coveralls, the jumpsuit.
You always think
firefighters call it like the bunker gear, whatever.
You always think an alien's going to come in like the movies, like,
yes, right. I'm like, an astronaut's coming to our class.
like floating like this, and then he walks in like a polo shirt tucked into jeans, and you're like, oh.
Yeah.
But still fascinating. We've talked about this on the show. Like, there's people you respect, like physicians, brain surgeons, all these people. And then kind of at the top is like
astronauts,
fighter pilots, and then even above that is astronauts. Like, we're talking about space travel and how it might be, in our grasp in our lifetime for, like, leisurely travel or whatever you want to call, like a vacation to go take a zip around the moon or Mars or wherever. I don't know if I could ever do it. I don't know if I have enough courage to get in like a missile and be shot into the sky. You know what I mean? So I have a lot of respect for the men and women who go up there and risk it all. And also, like, just the mental stress of being up there, living in, zero gravity and all the things that go into it. I don't know. It's like when you see guys in the military or whoever, and you're just like, could I actually wrap my mind around this and do this? I'm not sure I
could never do it. It's taking me back, Johnny, to check out this December 17th of 2021. If people want to go deep into our archives, our conversation with legendary Canadian astronaut, former commander of the International Space Station, Commander Chris Hadfield, who joined us on Real Talk just about a year after the show launched. And look at my hair. Why did nobody talk to me about my hairstyle?
Why did you laugh?
Because my hair is ridiculous. And I don't know why nobody confronted. There should have been an intervention when I was wearing but look at that guy.
Has anyone ever looked back like years ago and been like, my style was just impeccable and it's still with the times?
I don't think Chris Hadfield looks pretty good. That guy hasn't aged.
That guy could go 80s, 90s. 2000s.
That might actually be the secret to longevity is a
mustache.
A mustache, and you just got to spend 6 months at a time on the International Space Station, and your skin is like a baby's bottom. That was the December 17th of 2021. I know it was a long time ago. If you want to check out our conversation with Commander Chris Hadfield, hey, listen, but wait, there's more. We still have a whole other interview to get to, guys, because Dr. Jonathan Sharek is been hanging out in our green room. He's been watching the show to this point. He's not only is he an experienced, he's got a PhD in ed, and of course he's an experienced high school social studies teacher. He's also department head, and we wanted to get a teacher's firsthand perspective on Bill 25 and this kind of idea that politics and ideology are polluting classrooms. And I know it's not a conversation limited to Alberta. Sharon Carr said as much when she joined us, the strategist, a longtime and now former political staffer. In our most recent episode, you can get Sharon's take on that. But Jonathan's going to give us a sense of how Bill 25 is landing with him and his colleagues. That's coming up next on the show. First, if you are absolutely in love with this blazer that I'm wearing today, and I say it with a smile, everybody, but it's a pretty sharp blazer. I do know that. It jumped right off the shelf at me when I last walked into the Helm Clothing, this unbelievable 3-story luxury retail experience in downtown Edmonton. But no matter where you're hearing this show from, you can always check out thehelmclothing.com. Check out the website. I'm showing it to you right now at thehelmclothing.com. This is where you can shop their full collection, explore their latest arrivals, including this Luigi Bianchi jacket that I'm wearing. I absolutely love that stuff. The Stone Island collection as well. If you're looking for smart casual, I would say elevated smart casual, Stone Island is where you'll find your fit. The Helm Clothing has you covered. Of course, if you're looking for luxury casual wear or full custom, all the way up to formals, this is where you're going to want to start, and I guarantee you're going to leave satisfied. I literally walk in, I say, here's the event I'm hosting, or here's what I'm attending, and I need to look my best. They can help us work with looks that fit our body type, fit our comfort level, and work with your budget as well. Step into the latest from Brunello Cucinelli, Zegna, Ralph Lauren, and other top designers at thehelmclothing.com. Don't forget, when you're shopping online, the promo code REALTALK, all one word, will knock 10% off your entire order. That's big savings with the promo code REALTALK at thehelmclothing.com. We talk a lot about our partnership with Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider. Of course, they're powering our live chat each and every day. They're making sure that real talkers have a voice in the conversations that matter most. And quite frankly, their support of the show, it's a perfect fit with their roots as a company. You know, I mean, they're committed to their community in ways that other power providers or internet providers just simply are not. You can check out parkpower.ca to learn more about what I'm talking about. Yeah, you can compare rates on internet, electricity, and natural gas. I recommend that you do because you're going to save money. But you'll also realize that the minute that you sign up to Park Power, they're also going to ask you to choose which charity you'd like to benefit from that partnership, from your business. A portion of those proceeds are going to go to a charity in Alberta, and that's a big part of what makes Park Power so special. You can sign up at parkpower.ca right now. Check out parkpower.ca/Real Talk for exclusive promo codes. If you bundle services, you could save up to $150 off your next bill. That's your friendly local utilities provider, Park Power, at parkpower.ca. And before we get to Dr. Sharek, I want to remind you about the amazing work that's happening at UCAN Youth Services. And this is a very specific message for those of you that are in charge of hiring with your company. If you're looking for entry-level employees, but ones that need to go above and beyond. In other words, there's going to be opportunity in front of these new team members, and if they can seize the day, if they can run with it and make an impression, the world's their oyster. You know the kind of team member I'm talking about. Well, that's exactly who's graduating from the amazing ready-to-work programs at UCAN Youth Services. They're motivated, they're reliable, they're inspired. And of course, this is an amazing way for industry to support a really important nonprofit. You can look into becoming a partner with UCAN Youth Services today by visiting their website, ucan.ca. We've received a ton of feedback on Alberta's Bill 25. And I know for a lot of people, you know, your eyes kind of glaze over and you've heard of like Bill 206 or Bill 25. What are all these numbers? This is the one that's been introduced by Alberta's UCP government. They say to remove politics and ideology out of schools. I'll let you know mid next week after the Easter break. We'll be sitting down with Alberta's education minister. He's going to give us the government side of this. But of course, this all impacts classrooms, and more than anybody, it impacts teachers and students. And so we wanted to go to a source. We wanted to get an inside look at whether or not this will have a chilling effect on teachers, if social studies can actually be taught under these new parameters. And that's why we're grateful to welcome a longtime high school social studies teacher. He's also department head at his Alberta High School, Dr. Jonathan Sharek. Thanks for joining us right here in the Real Talk studio in Mercer Warehouse.
Good morning, Ryan.
Yeah, so Bill 25, removing politics and ideology out of schools. When you first heard of it, or when you saw the harbinger that this was coming, where did it take you personally as a longtime teacher? Where's your head at right now?
This was pretty recent. This was very sudden over spring break. And my first thought was I teach a lot of social 30, so grade 12 social studies, -1 or -2. And I would say the major themes of those are politics, ideology, and economics. So right away, I thought, well, I'm really not sure what is being implied about these essential elements of what's a required graduation course.
So politics and ideology, the words are right in the curriculum, or the words are right there in the mandate or the syllabus, the explainer to the student on what they're going to be exposed to. So we can assume that with this new legislation, you're not going to stop talking politics. And I'm sure that the education minister will say as much next week when we talk to him. But the idea is, or the implication is that teachers in Alberta have been politicizing their lessons, have been infusing their lessons with their own ideology. Does it make you bristle?
I've heard this. I'm used to hearing this for a long time. And I'd say the way I'd put it is you hear from this from time to time. And I'll say that Social 30 is a very comprehensive look. If you're going to pass a diploma, you have to know all the economic systems, all the political systems. And everyone kind of gets where they're from, their foundations, their fans, and they all get dunked on. They all have strengths and weaknesses. And a successful student's going to be able to articulate all of that. So I know there's been much made of this polarization in classrooms, and I'm not necessarily sure how much that's been happening or how much it's been amplified selectively.
Was it on your radar? What was it, a couple of months ago, 6 weeks ago, whatever it was, when that Fort Saskatchewan teacher had the audio released from their social studies class? Did you hear this? Was this on your radar?
I definitely heard about this.
The student captured the audio, submitted it to a right-wing grifter on social media who pushed it out, and it portrays this social studies teacher as basically ripping the UCP and ripping conservatives. What sort of a ripple effect did that have among teachers?
I think it was, I was really surprised that, say, the Premier of a province had the time to take a personal interest in this matter. And it sort of felt like this is something someone was looking for, some kind of aha moment. And I mean, there are lots of discussions in classrooms that are facilitated by teachers. I didn't think it would manifest itself in proposed legislation a short time later. Again, I'm trying really hard to connect a lot of this to say what the UCP campaigned on, and I don't really have luck doing that kind of thing.
Okay, so how do you explain to us? Like, can we get personal for a second and like how you teach and the approach that you take? Let me start with some basic questions. Like, do you vote? I'm not going to ask you who you vote for, but do you vote?
I vote, yes.
Okay, so do you ever disclose to your class who you voted for?
Usually doesn't come up. I'm pretty good at, they wanted to know how I voted, say, on the bargaining in the fall, and I kind of cheekily said, I voted on the computer.
Okay.
And just left it at that, kind of keeping the wall up, as in, I'm not really going to discuss exactly my preferences, but we're talking about this because I'm looking at people who are of voting age pretty soon, in a few months.
Of course. And we want our young people to be engaged and to understand how democracy works, and also to be able to find a fit, right? In other words, to be able to understand what party would best represent their own interests or that sort of a thing. You are working with, you're teaching in front of young adults, right? You're a high school social studies teacher, so at age 15 to 18 for the most part. So how do you approach those conversations? Like, if you're talking, like, how would you, for example, discuss Bill 25, this bill we're talking about, in the classroom?
I'm not sure I would discuss. It's just so new, and it's hard to know what it's going to fit. I mean, right now, I'd say the social 30 level, again, it's a really solid curriculum. It's very comprehensive. Part of it is it's from 2007, and I'm really thinking there's enough content to get through with the students to necessarily veer into exactly what's happening right now. There are some bigger pieces I find that are maybe a little more clear opportunities to talk about some important parts. So if you look at, say, Trump, he's going to town with the tariffs and the Supreme Court overruled them. We can say, well, this is separation of powers, and these are three branches independent of one another. That's a check on power. That's just a really key concept. All the grade 12s have got to know, sort of thing.
So when you're talking, like, do you talk about Donald Trump in the classroom? And if so, how do you talk about him? Like, I don't think I would do well as a teacher, because part of my job, I think, at least as I perceive it, is to, when appropriate, and as often as possible, share my personal perspective and share how things are landing with me. And the audience is free to agree and disagree. And oftentimes the best conversations happen when we disagree. But a teacher's in a different position, right? You can't call Donald Trump the Tangerine King, or can you? I mean, how do you accurately reflect, perhaps? And people, and again, here, look at, I'm catching myself and asking the question, because I was going to say the threat that Donald Trump represents to Alberta and Canada, but some Albertans, including some parents of some of your students or some of your students themselves, wouldn't share that perspective.
Yeah, I've run into that.
Even though they'd be wrong.
A lot of social teachers talk to each other, and we try to make anything connect to the curriculum and the outcomes. So I might say something like, well, in a democracy, the media is supposed to function in an open and transparent way, and they're supposed to hold power to account. And if you've seen reports of, say, Trump menacing the New York Times or threatening to take someone's license away, you can understand why there's some criticism about this. So that's third person. Again, I think it's pretty useful in terms of understanding the concept, and I don't think it's necessarily a great idea to put your own perspective in there.
Okay, so this is something, and have you been aware of this, like, since year one of teaching? Like, has that been kind of the MO, and do you feel like most teachers share that perspective or share that approach?
Yeah, I've had the chance to mark the diploma exams with other veteran teachers, and the conversations around the table, you're marking the essay of kids exiting high school for social, and it's really about how well do they demonstrate the concepts. The opinion is part of it, but it has to be backed up with some facts. If it's a really 360 view of what a position is, an opinion, and strengths and weaknesses. There's a rubric that will reward that kind of thing. If someone comes in hot with sort of a very narrow view, according to the criteria, that's not going to help them very much. So ultimately, I think social teachers talk a lot about how well do kids know the concepts, how can we explain it a little simpler, how can we help bridge the gaps of their understanding and connect it to what's happening.
We've got some teachers in our live chat right now, powered by Park Power. I sure appreciate their perspectives. Darren says, even at the high school level, a lot of time is spent on facts. Says you can, facilitate some discussion and leave some time for current events, but the curriculum is really dense. Jill says, I share, very little personal stuff with kids and almost zero opinions. Says, I find it weird that folks think that teachers are having discussions across the board.
And I think you said something about that yesterday, as in, there's this kind of boogeyman of all teachers are left-wing ideologues. Mm-hmm. And it is sort of strange when you consider what actually happens in schools.
But a lot of people feel that way, Jonathan.
I do.
I'm aware. Like you should see my DMs on Instagram. Anytime we talk about this, several, like I would say many, small C conservatives or big C, it doesn't matter. But the point is, we hear from a lot of people every time we talk about this that are absolutely convinced that teachers are promoting a certain ideology in classrooms, and they'll use varying phrases, but brainwashing, conditioning, grooming. I mean, we hear it all.
As you mentioned, there's that kind of trap set for the teacher with the recording, and it was disseminated. There's kind of this kind of gotcha industrial complex about this. The truth is, I think teachers are pretty fatigued. I mean, in the last several years, we've seen the pensions be hijacked. We've seen curriculum kind of really commandeered and politicized. About 2021, Jason Kenney brought in his Ottawa staffer, Chris Champion, to kind of oversee the curriculum. There's been a lot of changes. They took over the discipline process. It's never been clear what the problem was in any of these instances. And I like to call it, this is kind of like a dog chasing cars government. They seem to go really fast, not sure what they want to do when they catch a car. And you could see this sort of as soon as they get a few questions from reporters, that they kind of start to freestyle and things tend to fall apart a bit. So last summer, there was the book ban being discussed. And pretty soon after, the premier, when questioned, said, I didn't read Ayn Rand till I was, in college, and it really opened things up. And I think she kind of just added in, it would be wonderful if this is mandatory reading for high school students. It's appropriate, or for all students. I can't remember. Now, just thinking back to that wouldn't fly with what Bill 25 says. That's a pretty narrow point of view that shouldn't be brought into the classroom. So a lot of teachers are just trying to make sense of the chaos and the inconsistency, and it's not always easy.
I want to ask you just about some of the other, do you have an
Sure.
opinion on the flags, on the Canadian and Alberta flags only flying outside of schools? Have there been flags other than those two that have flown outside of your school?
That's a bit new to me, as well as the private members bill on, Fossil Fuels Appreciation Day?
Yes.
Did make me chuckle a bit.
Naheed talked about that earlier.
I tell kids all the time, look, when I was a kid in the 80s, I didn't get as full view of social studies as you did. I kind of got the old sort of Davy Crockett view, like nice, think of Frontierland at Disneyland. I don't think I knew much about treaties until I started teaching social studies and what a vital part they are. To not allow those in a classroom seems like a real disservice. And again, you're one of your last guests talks about the intent, meaning or otherwise. Also, I thought, what if I wanted to fly an Edmonton flag? I'm pretty partial to this town. I'm very proud of it. I feel like it's a little different from the rest of the province. It does have an official flag. There just seems to be more and more that has to go to the minister's desk, which to me, for kind of a self-styled small government libertarian, that seems to be a pretty contradictory move.
Is your school observing? What's the O Canada protocol at your school as it stands? Like, what was it? What did it look like 2 months ago?
I'm not sure if I've heard it or in the district. It makes me wonder if it has to do with there's kind of a dispute on the updated lyrics. I know at some political conventions, some people want to enthusiastically sing the old version to perhaps restore some lost tradition. And also in Social 20, grade 11, we talked about patriotism, if it's natural or coerced by the state. And it sort of made me think of that.
Oh, wow. So you're saying but not saying that it's coerced patriotism.
I do wonder if there's a state ideology or state neutrality. If you go by the legislature, you can see some I love oil and gas signs firmly in the window. And it does feel like there's some rules for thee but not for me vibe going on in terms of being neutral. Again, with Premier Smith's comments on Iran, I'm a little confused about what exactly that they want, kind of thing. I think if they were to spend time in a classroom, again, like they would see ideologies explored, where they came from, the foundations, the advantages, and of course the disadvantages, and each one has it. The other thing I was thinking about with the legislature was, kids go there. Grade 6 and 9 and 12 kind of has a democracy, political system through line in it. And I know at some point early on, Jason Kenney had the earplugs handed out. There was that stunt that received some poor, and I thought,
kind of blew up in his face.
It did. I hope the grade 6s weren't watching that day. And I was looking back, and I think about 3 years ago, MLA Dan Williams, I think later became Minister of Addictions.
Yeah, that's right. Mental health.
He chugged a beer in the legislature.
Yeah.
Got a very mild reprimand from the speaker at the time. And that kind of made me wonder, would there be sweeping new changes for a code of conduct of MLAs? And if not, again, there's a real strange asymmetry about how hands-on a small government might be, and what they're, say, expecting of a profession that they've really meddled with the last several years. It's odd.
Yeah. How would you characterize the relation? I mean, this is not, I'm going to ask you to speak on behalf of thousands of teachers. That's not what I'm doing. You're not Jason Schilling, president of the ATA, but you're a department head. You're an experienced social studies teacher. If you're just joining our live stream presented by California Closets, this is Dr. Jonathan Sharek. We've known each other for a long time. I know you to approach your profession with a great degree of pride and to work in earnest and to care very deeply about your students. And I've seen that over, 15 years or so. We've known each other a long time. It's probably a more tense time now. I don't know if I say than ever, but than ever, between Alberta's teachers and the Alberta government. Do you feel that on the front line? Like, do you feel that in the school? Do you feel that in the staff room? Did you feel it this fall? Do you feel it now?
Yeah, it's been a lot. Like I said, all of those things added up, the pension, the taking over of discipline, and you don't know if any of those things are going to bear out. You're told it has to happen. It's passed with a majority government. And for example, I'm not sure how effective the discipline process is. Mr. Nenshi's comments about removing welcoming to make schools safer seems really hard to understand. So as a teacher, I feel like I have a lot of expertise and goodwill and collegiality, but I know my voice doesn't matter, say, compared to, I feel like if there's a Take Back Alberta barbecue and someone whispers in MLA's ear, that's going to drive policy, and that might, rush proposed legislation into being.
How are you covering or teaching around the separation petition and the referendum and Alberta's future in Canada? Is that something like, help me understand here, because I understand that you have curriculum, right? My mom was the chair of a curriculum committee when I was growing up. So I've always understood the value of curriculum and the importance of it and focus and direction. It's much different than my world, where we're sort of covering, what's making news, the real issues that matter to real people and how real people really talk about it. But that can change in any given moment, right? I don't know why I thought of Tumbler Ridge, but I did right now. I mean, that's an example of, you have an editorial plan for a week, and then a tragic school shooting occurs, and then you're starting from scratch, and the show is talking about something totally different than it would have been covering an hour before. That's not really how you teach social studies, I don't think. But you're not like ignoring what's happening in Alberta right now, are you?
That's one of the fun parts. When things happen, you can often roll them into what you're doing. If it's nationalism, globalization, grade 9 is a lot of government and economics, and all the ideological stuff. What are leaders doing? How far are their governments going? What are they doing with taxes? What's happening with tariffs? So for Alberta, I've kept pretty general and said, Canada's complex. Quebec seems to be the most distinct, and they've had this, though it's waning quite a bit. Desire to separate. First Nations groups obviously are also quite a nation unto themselves. And Alberta's sort of emerging as this sentiment is increasing. Like there's noise out there. Trying to give them the kind of national picture. The more we look at a place like Newfoundland, I might say, you should also know, they feel pretty different too. Late joiners, 1949. But, after my parents were born, they also celebrate July 1st quite differently because they fought alone in the First World War, and it's more of a Memorial Day for them than it is a National Canada Day.
But you're like, some people feel like Alberta should stay in Canada, and some people feel like Alberta should leave, and everyone will have a vote, and make sure you finish your homework and I'll see you tomorrow. Like, is that really how you have to teach it? I couldn't handle that.
Well, I mean, right there now, I've got understand contemporary issues, including controversial issues from multiple perspectives. So kind of set the table for them, or if we're talking about one thing, I will pose, can you imagine how another side feels about this? Say about separation or further, I'm not sure what it could be.
I think that's a positive, though.
Yeah.
Like we say on this show, seek to understand.
Sure.
That's exactly what you're doing. We'll have some of my friends are separatists. Like, that's a fact. Some of my family members are separatists. That's a fact. I don't hate people because they see the future of Alberta differently than I do. I think that, I try to strike it. You're under much more scrutiny, and I don't really have to answer. I have to answer to this audience, and I have to answer to our sponsors. But that's it. And our sponsors typically know what they're signing up for. They want real talk, so we do that. But I can kind of say what I think. You really can't. There's this sort of chill now. I'll return to the audio recording captured in that Fort Saskatchewan classroom. Like, that must have put a chill through every teacher, right? Like, I would be watching every single word that I said for fear that there was some, by the way, little fucking weasel in my classroom that was going to record me and release cherry-picked audio to misportray how I teach. That's what my concern would be. Did it have that effect on you or your colleagues?
I feel it's my 25th year, so I feel pretty comfortable, and I really enjoy facilitating discussions. I'd say actually more times I'm trying to promote kids to contribute. They can be pretty quiet. So we can get into interesting discussions. For example, there's a lot of school resource officers in Edmonton high schools. And they're good community people. I will talk to them and say, do you want to come talk to the grade 12s about various aspects of the justice system? About
These are
your
police
job.
officers, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I find it works well if the kids think about questions and they send them in. And we find actually between the two of us, we don't often get to a conclusive answer because there's lots of gray area. What are courts doing? How far can police go in enforcing laws? How does everything interact with each other? And they kind of find out you might have a deeper understanding by exploring all sides of the issue, but you're not going to necessarily go out of social studies knowing exactly what you believe. I tell them, you're young, you're going to get jobs, your income's going to change, your family situation's going to change. Actually, in Social 30, you start the year by talking about, well, where do your ideologies come from? Is it media? Is it family? Could it be culture? Just kind of a general exploration. To start to think about why people think the way they do for ideologies.
Ideology is not a dirty word.
I hope not. I got to really read that legislation very carefully.
Yeah. I mean, I just think, I said this to Sharon Carr yesterday on the show. It's kind of interesting. I called it laughable yesterday when you're endeavoring to remove politics and ideology out of school by pulling political levers that are based on ideology. I mean, it is kind of a, I'm looking forward to speaking to Minister Nicolaitis next week. I don't expect it to be a particularly combative interview. I want to prove to the audience that we can have conversations, and I don't know that I inherently disagree with everything that they're doing. I mean, I actually love the O Canada thing. Johnny, do you remember when you were growing up? Do you remember? I'm much, much older than you, John.
At least 30 years.
At least 30 years. I actually legitimately embarrassed by this. I don't remember if we sang "O Canada" in school. I think we did.
I went to grades most of grade school and high school in Ontario. But yeah, every day the anthem.
Every day
it played over the announcements.
Okay.
I don't know if we all stood up and took our hats off and sang, but I do remember that it played, and then the principal would give the announcements.
Okay. Yeah. By the way, Les is wondering, thanks for your super chat support, Les. He wonders, will schools stop touring the legislature or watching question period? The legislation is not saying that they're not talking about politics. You're not teaching about politics. That would be insane. But they want politics. They want the teachers' politics out of the classroom. So I would imagine like ledge tours, watching QP, stuff like that would still continue. Do you anticipate that?
I think so. I would hope it might, encourage some better behavior by MLAs in session. But I hope it would still be very foundational for grade 6. Absolutely.
There have been some stories through history of students sitting in the gallery witnessing some of the poorest behavior you could possibly imagine.
I'm sure.
By adults, by elected representatives. Yeah. Before we thank you for your time, and thanks for doing this, by the way, on Easter break.
Sure.
We appreciate that. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about in the context of this or the bigger picture that you think is important for this audience to hear?
I think there's a lot of confusion because of the chaos and different directions that this government can go. I want you to imagine if you open up a letter and it said all podcast hosts will now have to use microphones. You'd say, well, we've been doing this the whole time. That's a lot of what's going on, as in we're going through curriculum, we're facilitating activities, we're really encouraging a deep understanding of all of these. And one thing I do worry about is with, say, the current government really wanting to get a hand on curriculum, I feel like they're going to try to change it from something quite comprehensive that I think puts us at a very high standard in terms of jurisdictions, and they're going to want to make it very narrow. The thing I might close with is, and I think this is noted with your last guess, is that there's irony lost. I think you said, too, using politics to get politics out of the classroom. Mm-hmm. I remember Ronald Reagan used to be a conservative hero, and he was partly famous for saying the most frightening words are, "I'm from the government, and I'm here to help." And I feel like that's pretty applicable in this situation, that if the government is helping with neutrality, that is cause for concern.
Dr. Jonathan Sharek is a veteran high school social studies teacher and a department head at an Alberta high school, and has always been since inception a wonderful friend of the show. Thanks for doing this. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet. Real Talkers, these conversations happen with the support of partners like our friends at Northwest Film Fest. You can find them online at northwestfest.ca. This is Canada's longest-running nonfiction film festival. It goes April 8th to the 14th this year at the legendary Metro Cinema at the Garneau. You can browse the full lineup, more than 40 full-length and short films for you to choose from. Again, that's northwestfest.ca. I want to put a couple of things on your radar. Number one, if you are a Real Talk patron, if you support us on Patreon, or if you're a Real Deal or Real VIP YouTube channel member, check your messages, because we have an offer there for you. You can claim your tickets to Northwest Fest right now. We have 20 pairs to give away. The first 20 of you that sign up to receive the tickets will do exactly that, and we hope you enjoy your night out at Northwest Film Fest. Thanks so much for your support of the show. I also want to let you know that we're going to be presenting a Filmmakers Roundtable. Johnny, really looking forward to this. It's going to be on the 8th of April. This in support of Northwest Film Fest, coming up on April 8th right here on Real Talk. We're going to hear more about Dolph Unbreakable, the story of Dolph Lundgren. I'm super excited, of course, about Mr. Goalie. I was just out in Stony Plain, Alberta the other day at the Glen Hall Arena. Shout out to the Northwest U11 Hawks. Mr. Goalie is a story about the legendary goaltender Glen Hall, the pride of Stony Plain, Alberta. Kings of Venice, a hilarious look at the power players behind the paddle tennis community in Venice Beach, California, and their battles with the mortal enemies, the pickleball crowd. Yeah, that's right. Who knew the paddle tennis and pickleball communities were so at odds? That's the story in Kings of Venice. And, of course, there's so many more, including the 50th anniversary screening of one of my all-time favorite films, The President's Men, starring Dustin Hoffman, Robert Redford. Those two films, Network and All the President's Men, swept the 1977 Oscar telecast, and they're presenting them again on their 50th anniversary at Northwest Film Fest. It all kicks off April 8th at the Metro Cinema at the Garneau. Again, check out northwestfest.ca. And before we get to what you have to say about teachers and social studies and bias and ideology, if you're sick of thinking about everything and you just want to play poker, I would love for you to join me. In fact, I'd love for you to come take all my money, or try your best, at the Hearts and Hands Poker Tournament. That goes April 16th and 17th at Pure Casino Yellowhead. This is in support of the Ben Stelter Foundation. We're so proud to support the Ben Stelter Foundation. If you missed Ben's dad, Mike, on the show just last week, make sure you check that out. They were talking to us about the Ben Stelter Center for Proton Therapy and Neuroscience. They're looking to bring that to Edmonton. This is actually something I had no idea about. You know that Canada is the only G7 nation without proton therapy? It's a huge resource for families with a loved one fighting cancer, including the kids, you guys. We have to get proton therapy to Canada, and it's going to be right here in Alberta, in part thanks to the funds raised at the Hearts and Hands Poker Tournament. You can hear Mike Stelter on this show. Go to our March 27th episode. You can sign up to play poker with me and a whole bunch of other folks with up to $50,000 in cash and prizes. We know it's going to be a great time. That's April 16th and 17th at Yellowhead Pure Casino. Register today at benstelterfoundation.com or check out the show notes on YouTube on the podcast. We'll have the link right there. Come take my money, April 16th. John Hicks, I've been watching the poker shows that are on. Of course, it's like typically on Sportsnet in between hockey games, in between baseball games. You know, they get the poker tournaments on, and I've been trying to study up. You know, I've been watching and going through, and I've played poker for many, many years, but I feel like I'm a little bit rusty. And my biggest concern, my biggest fear is that I'm going to show up to this Hearts and Hands poker tournament, go all in on like the third hand and be swept from the table, be the first one out, and have to head home with my tail between my legs like half an hour after sitting down. Mm-hmm. So I've been cramming, I've been studying. Very much looking forward to that. Again, benstelterfoundation.com. Interesting to see Real Talkers reporting on where their heads are at with education in Alberta, with the alleged bias or the influence, the ideological influence that teachers are having in classrooms. You're chuckling. What are you chuckling about?
It's our Friday. I don't want to, but it's just
give the people
like
something.
Look at our guest today. Did this gentleman look like he's someone who goes in every day and wants to start a fight with students and indoctrinate them and like the majority of us, no matter what job we do, we're trying to find some sense of purpose, right? Even it doesn't matter what job you have. Everybody wants a job where they have a bit of purpose so they can get up every day and be able to, because nobody really wants to work, right? I mean, you know what I mean? Like nobody really wants to get up every day and grind, but we all have to. That's life. So the idea that these people go to work every day, or the majority of them, I'm not going to say there aren't people out there who are a bit spicy, nurses, teachers, whoever they are, pipe fitters, I don't care who you are. And they don't go to work and try and, give little comments or let people know where they stand on issues. We all know those people. We're two of them right here who do it every freaking day. We shove it down your throat.
Although we would do this even if we were independently wealthy, John.
Oh, yeah. We'd be in a coffee shop screaming at the top of our lungs with the Hawaiian shirts on and sandals. But what I mean is like the idea that these people who work hard, for the most part, are underpaid, let's be honest, and every day they get up and go into work and try and start drama and get the smoke from not only kids, but now parents rather feel like teachers are openly trying to argue with them, trying to indoctrinate their kids, trying to get more emails, texts, social media tags, and all the other crap they deal with. Yeah. It's just laughable to me. So that's why I giggled.
I see that Shiloh, first of all, Shiloh, I appreciate you watching the show. In our live chat, didn't like my comment that they said a little weasel. That they say, grow up, Ryan. Let me tell you this.
Oh man, kids are the worst.
That is a weasel move.
It is.
That is a weasel, greasy, dirty, unethical move.
Snitch.
You're a snitch. And as Ambustion said, snitches get stitches. And now people are going to flip out and say, Jesperson's saying condoning violence
against children.
Violence is never the answer. But I will say this, what that kid did is a punk ass move. And if I was the teacher, I guarantee the teacher knows who it is or has a suspicion who it is.
For sure they do.
And I would make that class for the rest of the year, and it's really too bad what it would mean for the rest of the students, but I would make that the most boring ass class that you've ever had, because that teacher, and you guys, if you're not familiar with the story, just Google it. We covered it at length. I'm not going to get back into it. I'm not going to play the audio again, but essentially this teacher was like, and we've heard firsthand reports. There's actually a very good friend of the show is a very good friend of the teacher. The teacher has declined an interview, which is fair enough and fine. I think that they were devastated at what happened. They approached their job with professionalism, and they were misportrayed, and it stung them, and they got burned. And the last thing they want to do is give an interview, by the way. And I can appreciate that perspective, but at the invitation of just this basically, this like social media hero, this like right-wing social media guy who's built an audience of grifters and complainers, basically, separatists, people that want to leave. He invited his followers to either get their kids, or if his followers were kids, to capture teachers and to send in the audio. And he said, and I'll release it. And he did exactly that. And so this kid, they've never released the full, where's the audio recording from before and
Here's
after?
a photo of the kid.
Release the whole thing. And here's where the kid lives. And here's the kid's mom's phone number.
No, we're laughing.
But in all seriousness,
but
we wouldn't dox anybody, and whatever.
Well, somebody's going to clip this.
I've done
a
lot of really.
That's what happened.
Well, sure, and I've done a lot of stupid shit when I was a teenager, tons of it, and so I guess the kid, either will double down on this and be proud of their move, or maybe learn later that what they did was kind of a bullshit move. But it was a weasel move, and I think that in classrooms. In certain areas of life, this is not one of them. In this studio, we say when the red lights are on, you're on the record, and everything is fair, and everything you say, you got to stand by what you say or apologize for it. That's pretty much how it works. But there needs to be a circle of trust in some context where people can safely discuss ideas and share things. And for example, if a teacher feels comfortable enough to portray here's an extreme right-wing point of view and then parody that point of view, and then here's an extreme left-wing point of view and parody that view, and then it's cherry-picked and the one part of it is shared, and then that's used as fuel to the fire that teachers are attacking conservatives. There's no integrity in that process at all, and it is a weasel move. So I'll stand by my words on that. I think that what the kid did was brutal. I think that if they were coached to do it, it's even more brutal. And I think it was unfortunate what it meant for the teacher.
That was my first thought when it happened, because this let's not forget, this came out on a social media post, right? And the first thing I thought is it this person's kid, or a kid their kid knows, or someone related to this person, this entity that put it out? Because for me, you hear a lot of crazy crap. This is nothing against teachers, but they're oddballs. They're a little bit, they're a little bit quirky.
Teachers?
Yeah, they're I remember all my teachers in high school, and each one of them, well, they were very specific to what they taught. I know it's different nowadays. A lot of teachers teach a lot of different things, but I'd look at my science teacher and I'd be, I just knew the type of guy he was. And my gym teacher, you just knew the type of woman that was, right? They're just kind of, there are types of people. It's not bad to say that. But the idea that they all don't make mistakes, that they're all not human, we're already videotaped so much. It hurts me to know that the worst part out of all of this isn't that teachers are on edge. It's that if I was a student in that high school, I'm like, whoa, people are recording me while I'm in class. I can't put up my hand and ask a question or give an opinion now.
It's a weasel move.
Because the guy next to me has his phone in his pocket with his voice note recorder on. That's what I immediately thought of. Not that teachers already know they're under scrutiny, but now kids who are just 13, 14, 15, 16 are I'm not going to say anything in class anymore. I'm just going to do my notes and go home, because everything I say is going to be potentially put on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had several times through the course of my career where I'm I guarantee someone's recording me right now. I guarantee it. I was out for a dinner. I can't share yet.
Whenever I go for cocktails,
who it was
I'm
with.
Where's everyone's
Well, I
purses?
went for a dinner with somebody who invited me, and it was a very curious invitation. And I'm not trying to be coy, Real Talkers. I'm telling you that in months to come, I will be able to share the full story with you, and using names and everything, because the person will be sitting here in studio. That's the agreement that we reached. But a big
Jordan Peterson.
Well, I mean, no, not specifically, but adjacent maybe. And anyway, the point is, I was intrigued by the dinner invitation and approached with some caution. And while the conversation including dinner and drinks, was 3 hours the entire time. I was like, I'm not sure. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are times where your senses are heightened and your suspicion, your gut instinct is telling you to be careful. And I really don't think we want an environment, this will be the safest thing I say all week, where teachers are concerned that their students are going to be recording them and publicly releasing comments that are made out of context into the public. Jill says, teachers need more backbone. She says, had a student done that to me, I would make classes there deadly boring. There would be no enrichment, no fun stuff, textbook and paper. Breaking trust has consequences, and I 100% agree. Tommy Temper's in the chat. He says, teachers are pro-union, unions are NDP supporters. That's the big problem. Tommy, I find that to be overly simplistic, and I've always found that there are union groups, labor groups that do support progressive political parties. That's a fact, and we know that as a fact. That's one of the big reasons Andrew Knack got elected mayor, because organized labor backed him in a big way, and it helped him out, and we have seen that happen. But there are also many conservative union workers, right? Like, that's what I can't wrap my mind around. People don't understand, like, how much of Fort McMurray's workforce is union. Like, probably almost all of it. And I don't see, and that's like one example off the top of my head. How much of Grand Prairie's, in particular, blue-collar workforce is union? Probably a ton. And I don't believe, I understand that you can draw some parallels, and some unions that do have considerable power and deep pockets do tend to support progressive politicians for sure. But being a union member does not make you an NDP shill or an NDP supporter automatically. Early stage in my career, I was sort of in and out of unions coming up in journalism. It was always really interesting. When I started at the Calgary Herald, no union. I get a radio job, no union. I go into TV, union. And then within that television station, I become a host, non-union. And so I've been bouncing in and out, and I've worked adjacent to unions. I've seen them. I have my own thoughts. I feel like when you're taking a look at unions and the value of unions, you can easily argue that unions are incredibly important and have been through history. And you can also argue that in a lot of cases, unions are top heavy and bloated with fat cats that aren't serving their members, and that they should be less involved politically. And I'm all for those debates. But I just want to push back when I see teachers are pro-union, unions are NDP supporters. That's the problem. It's just like A plus B does not equal C in that circumstance.
I think overly simplistic is the most bang on and nicest way to describe Tommy Temper. But what I would just agree with you, like, if you think of when unions came about during the Industrial Revolution, like, we're talking about hardworking, blue collar, most of the time, religious, God-fearing. Like, I could look up a picture of the people who created unions and show you to them, and you would immediately peg them as a conservative. So when people, I understand that, the values, liberal reform and social democracy and all that are intertwined kind of now with unions, and they did eventually, that's what happened, right? But like, this idea that everyone in a union is like a communist, it makes me laugh as well. Like you just said, the majority of oil and gas workers in this province are in unions. Like, what's going on? Why are we talking about this?
Ambustion, meantime, has a theory on my poker strategy. He says, why does Jespo seem like the kind of guy that can count cards but doesn't let anybody know?
Google lenses. That's how you're going to win.
If I could count cards, I would not have the track record I have in casinos, Ambustion. I would tell you that. Darren reporting that his school has sang O Canada and does a land acknowledgement daily and says he's all for it. Tracy says, what great guest today, by the way. She says, I introduced the show to our northern partners. Tracy, that just means the world to us. And how about this from Tommy in Olive Branch, by the way, in follow-up. He says, thanks, Jespo and Johnny, for doing what you do. Not everyone will agree, but we all have an opinion. Tommy, music to my ears, and it's our pleasure. It's our pleasure. What are you ang about? What are you ang about? Don't shit on a nice comment. Don't shit on a bouquet of flowers.
Hey, I do what I want.
When Shiloh told me to grow up after calling that kid a weasel, Ambustion 5 into the super chat says, please never grow up.
Like
if you guys keep paying me,
really,
if you guys keep paying me $5 to never grow up, I promise I will never grow up. Weasel, and I do believe I said fucking weasel, but that is the most kind and gentle thing I can say about the move that kid pulled. And I'm giving the kid the benefit of the doubt because I threw a frozen cow liver through a car windshield when I was 17. I had to do community service at a juvie record. Like, I've shared that story with you. I've made mistakes.
Kids are assholes. I used
I was
to
an
stand
asshole. I
on
was an
top
idiot.
of a bridge with Dale Donuts with my friends and nail cars.
Like, we were idiots. We were idiots. And so I understand you can pull stupid moves. I hope that I've grown up. I think that kid can too, but I just the kid really threw their teacher. I'm not going to explain this. If you don't get it, you definitely don't get it because it was a bullshit move. Anyway, I digress. Hey, we have to celebrate something. In our most recent episode of the show, this was April 1st, we were hanging out with our friends from North Road Investment Counsel. We're very proud to partner with them, the steady hand, the studied voice at northroadic.com. And Marshall McAllister and his colleague, Misha Niemtsev, joined us to talk about their digital risk advisory services. This isn't an ad, guys. This is if you missed the episode or you missed the interview, this is something that could save you a huge headache and maybe a ton of money. People are being defrauded on a daily basis. I couldn't believe the numbers that Marshall shared with us on it. We have a spinoff, a follow-up, something very special that was announced right around the same time that we were talking to these two. But if you missed our interview on April 1st, here's a quick highlight on the digital risks that millions of Canadians are facing every single day.
We are seeing people's identities stolen and loans taken out in names from criminals. We've seen funds stolen. We've seen romance scams. We've seen just general fraud where somebody thought that they were helping somebody raise money for a gift, and it was Amazon cards going to somewhere totally different. These numbers are totaling, reported at $650 million in 2024.
Jeez.
This is larger than the gross revenue that the Edmonton Oilers bring in on an annual basis. So everything that they're doing, selling tickets, beers, popcorn, the entire thing it's bigger than that. Now, Misha, we know that most people that are impacted by these types of scams actually don't report it because in our society, it has been brought about that it's a bit embarrassing because you think you've been duped, right? Which is a problem. So this same center is saying that it's likely 10 to 20 times bigger than the reported amount. 10 to 20 times.
What are a couple of things that everybody can do today, right now, to lessen their digital risk?
Of course, I think the first step would be the most simple one is enable multi-factor authentication on all critical accounts. And what are critical accounts is your email, your banking, obviously, any financial investment account, your social media, your CRA account that has been a big target the past few years. So I would secure those with multi-factor. I would use strong and unique passwords. The advice on passwords have been changing the past few years. Complexity is becoming less of importance as the length of the password.
Oh, really?
Sticking 3, 4, 5 words together with a special character seems to be preventing much more brute forcing attacks than the complexity of them. It's impossible to remember your passwords, especially if they're all unique. So use a password manager. That's a very, very simple solution towards that. A lot of our systems are already coming included with password managers, so you just have to learn how to use them. And very important, update your devices. I keep seeing clients who feel very secure, yet they're using computers that are 10, 15, 20 years old, and they're no longer receiving security updates. And those are critical for your security. It should not be neglected.
So I love that. That was Misha Niemtsev and Marshall McAllister from North Road Investment Counsel.
We're going to end the show. I've got some updates I got to do here on the computer. So.
Oh, no, dude, just make sure, just remove all the passwords.
We're going to start, right?
I find it very difficult to work with passwords. I could never, no. But in all seriousness, so Marshall, present the numbers he was presenting on Canadians that are being defrauded out of hundreds of millions of dollars annually. And then he shared with us that idea that we've heard before, which is, Julie Matthews has shared this on the show as well. Julie's like basically a consumer advocate and basically like a scam buster. She does an amazing job. She usually comes and joins us once a year or so. She says the same thing, that the reporting on those that have been taken by scams or fraud or whatever the case may be, basically that are at risk digitally and have seen their, in many cases, worst fears realized, life savings evaporated, taken to the cleaners, not to mention your heart broken with the romance scams. But they say that like the reporting is around 5 to 10%, Johnny, which means that if we know for a fact, Marshall made the point in the April 1st interview that Canadians are taken for like approximately $600 million a year. He says the number could be like way higher. If you think about it, it's mind-boggling. So I encourage you to check it out. I know a lot of you in the chat right now are saying you really enjoyed the interview. There's more tips, in particular from Misha, does a great job, and you can connect with North Road. But here's the thing. You know how proud we are to support and partner with our friends at Edify Edmonton. Well, annually, Trudy and her team at Edify put a list of Edifiers together, right? And this is a group of Edmontonians in particular that in this case, from their 2026 list, create and trend to the needs of a city's civil, social, and business life. And on the Edifiers list for 2026, look at this, John, under the Trailblazer category is our friends from North Road Investment Counsel. Absolutely fantastic stuff and a very well-deserved honor. You can read more about it at edifyedmonton.com. I love, as I was reading through the article, the feature on them that was written by Mariana Gutierrez-Serna, and you can read that again at edifyedmonton.com. She focuses and highlights specifically the digital risk advisory services that we were talking to Marshall and Misha about the day that this was announced. How cool is this? And I want to read from the piece. One of those intentional refinements is North Road's digital risk advisory program, born of an interaction that Marshall McAllister, who was with us in studio, had with a senior family member who was frustrated with technology and uncertain about managing risk. So they started exploring what people need to feel confident navigating the digital world. The program was created in response to folks that are, in some cases, older, maybe more vulnerable to online threats, as an essential, not an optional service. The system designed to keep risk in check, in addition to helping clients make informed decisions about their wealth through their counseling services. And this feature, again, at edifyedmonton.com, wraps with this. At its core, North Road's independence is not about standing alone, but about building with intention, continuing to evolve while remaining grounded in the city. Just incredible stuff. We're thrilled to partner with the team at North Road. And I just feel like as well, Real Talkers, when we partner with somebody, when I use my voice and say that, if you're looking for wealth advisory services, financial planning, digital risk advisory services, we recommend these people. We're putting our reputation out there as well, and it just means a lot to see Marshall and Carrie and Misha and their entire team at North Road recognized in this way. And a big shout out to Trudy as well at Edify. Trudy and her whole team. She wouldn't love all the focus on her, but the team at Edify Edmonton for their amazing list of Edifiers for 2026. You can check it all out at edifyedmonton.com. John, we wrap every week here on the show. And this one, an early edition, as we head into the Easter Passover long weekend with the Flamethrower. This is Real Talker's hottest takes, as submitted on YouTube comments and emails to talk@ryanjesperson.com, presented by our friends at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. And we lead off with Anne. Anne writes in and says, Jespo, when I heard on Real Talk that the Alberta government was going to ban or at least restrict different points of view through this Bill 25, the classroom bill, they wanted everything to be neutral, but they also want students to learn how to think critically. This is laughable, says Anne, if not downright ridiculous. How can anybody think critically if they never hear opposing or at least different views? How do you teach history without demonstrating opposite views, right? How do you understand what's happening today with the war and Donald Trump and how the world's being destabilized and what Mark Carney's doing to try to help Canada avoid being sucked into the vortex of Trump? Careful, Anne, that's ideology right there. How can we possibly help students understand why living in Canada and being a citizen here is not just a right but a privilege that brings responsibility, including critical thinking? Let's hold this government accountable by all the things that they're putting out. This critical thinking thing, I mean, if that's key to having any sort of life that's called a free thinking life, says Anne, Says, I also can't help but notice that's an excellent reason to continue to tune into Real Talk and listen to you and your guests. Hey, Ann, thanks very much. Fantastic Flamethrower. What about this one from Tim? Tim takes us up on our invitation to grade Mark Carney, his year one report card. Tim just says, what have the Liberals really done to make things better for the people of Canada? He says, I know. They've done nothing. Carney continues to spend. Tim says, sadly, I'm leaving Canada before it goes bankrupt. That from Tim. Well, Tim, don't head south. They're like how many trillions in debt? Anyway, I digress. Bruce says on the Danielle Smith Golden Cat story, he says, I'll admit it's a funny distraction. The Premier's actually probably thrilled to have her opponents talking about this as opposed to the real scandals. But I haven't heard anyone, says Bruce, raise the point that the Premier accepted a $300,000 carpet from Alberta taxpayers. She's displaying it in her office. The worst thing is the $300,000 hasn't even paid off in favors to Albertans. Of course, that may be a conflict of interest with her real job working for the oil industry. Bruce, to clarify, $280,000 for the carpet, and it was 6,500 square feet of carpet in the office. So, it is what it is. But point taken, Bruce, and thanks for contributing. What about this one from Janelle, who writes in from Red Deer? She actually CCs us on an email to MLA Jason Steffen, who wrote that op-ed in the Western Standard encouraging people to sign the separation petition. What? She says, I'm writing as a concerned citizen to express my deep unease regarding your encouraging Albertans to sign a petition supporting separation. The rhetoric is troubling on several levels. Advocacy for separation raises serious constitutional concerns. It undermines legal and political framework. It disregards long-standing treaties. But beyond those concerns, public support for separation creates uncertainty that can negatively impact investor confidence and economic stability. At a time we should be focused on growth, collaboration, and resilience, this message sends the opposite signal. And perhaps most importantly, writes Janelle in Red Deer, your role as an MLA is to represent all your constituents, right? Not those that, get this, support a particular ideological position. Nicely played, Janelle. She says encouraging division on an issue like this risks alienating many Albertans who expect their elected officials to work toward unity and constructive solutions. Please set aside your personal position on this matter. Focus on representing the diverse voices in your constituency while strengthening Alberta's place in Canada, as opposed to promoting ideas that divide us. Maybe the email of the week, Janelle. Love that one. This one from Brent, who says, Ryan, Shyla sent you an email about how MAiD, medical assistance in dying, was suggested for her son. Very powerful email, by the way. It says, I don't feel like that's how the system's designed, right? It's terrible delivery of care. And I imagine that most doctors would agree that's not how the system's supposed to work. But that doesn't mean you scrap the system. It says, I don't want my email to come across as, not empathetic to people who've been treated poorly. What's especially frustrating, though, is the whole thing feels directly out of the UCP playbook. Start with rigid ideology, promote controversy over isolated or smaller incidents. We were just talking about that. Scapegoat the thing that they ideologically oppose, and then legislate in ways that were not campaigned on, because for now, they have the hammer. Brent goes on to say it's happened the same way with trans kids, teacher strikes, immigration, blaming cities for crime, supervised consumption, the failings of the healthcare system, and the need for two tiers. By the way, we'll talk more next week about surgeons in Alberta working without a contract right now. Not happy about it. Brent says the direction that the UCP is taking is so disheartening and painful. Says, I appreciate the work Real Talk does to keep people informed and educated. Thanks for such a strong platform. That from Brent. Thanks for such a strong email, buddy. What about this one? From B, who says, Ryan, your Trish Bowman interview, Inclusion Alberta, March 19th, was infuriating. I totally agree with advocating for stronger social supports, but that is where our overlapping beliefs ended. They're opposing, by the way, the new rules on MAiD. They're supporting the Alberta government's pushback on MAiD and adding, do I say barriers? They wouldn't like the editorializing. You can check out the interview with Trish Bowman. I appreciate Trish a lot. We don't agree on everything, and that was evident in the interview. B says, fighting to withhold a medical opinion from anybody's bullshit, not the place of government nor any advocacy group. When a medical option has a specific guideline as to who qualifies, that's not discrimination. And this is the flaw in Alberta's guiding principle. Nobody's being discriminated against by MAiD being an option. not healthcare providers, not government, not society. The example of a doctor offering it as an option to a patient with a long road to recovery is not how the system's supposed to work. It should be treated and dealt with as such. I have deep respect for healthcare professionals, but that doesn't stop some of them from being dipshits with bad bedside manner. It says Inclusion Alberta fails to seek the best for all people with disabilities by blindly advocating for inclusion in any and all scenarios. People should be able to make their own choices whether they are disabled or not. Blindly arguing for inclusion, thinking you need to protect the rights of everyone who's considered disabled ahead of what's best for that specific person dealing with that specific thing is so damaging. B says, I haven't written this much at once since I finished high school, but I was so deeply offended at all the things your guest was saying. Everything I've written, Ryan, I didn't even get into how much I agree that Covenant Health, the Catholic provider, should not be able to withhold approved medical options, or how we as a country are failing so many people who end up in healthcare and are considering MAiD because of it, or how our schools could do so much more to provide better learning outcomes if they had the resources. B says, thanks for reading if you got this far, Jespo. Time for a tall glass of Hanson Distillery Northern Eyes whiskey. B, I like the way you're thinking, and I'm going to do exactly that right now. As we head in to the long weekend, Real Talk is off on Friday, the 3rd of April. We're back on Monday with Supriya Dwivedi. We've got a great week of shows in store. You can send us a flamethrower anytime to talk@ryanjesperson.com, and make sure when you visit the DQs in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road for a flamethrower signature stack burger. You went Oreo last week. What are you going with for your blizzard this week?
Don't even talk to me. I'm going to be putting a straw in my
You blew everybody's mind with
medium
that, by the
vanilla
way,
cone and asking them to fill the hole with caramel before they dip it in chocolate.
I'm like literally going to go do that, and if they allow me to do
Steal
that, my entire
ideas.
life is changing.
Shout out Pierre Polyev. Steal my ideas, Real Talkers.
Just tell him that Johnny from Real Talk sent you. So you take a little heat off me for all the extra work. We love you guys. Happy Passover. They say, Chag Samish. I did my best. Happy Easter and one love. We'll see you Monday.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton.